The wind came first, cold, sharp, and laced with pine and distant snow, rolling down from the white-crowned peaks beyond the frost fangs. It stirred the banners over Winterfell's battlements, and curled around the freshly mended stones as if testing their strength. Beneath those banners, gray Direwolf of House Stark quartered, with a three-headed dragon of black and red. Torches guttered, smoke drifting like spectral serpents into the dusk. Few in the courtyard understood what the mingled sigils truly meant yet, but all sensed the weight of change. Robb Stark stood on the steps of the great keep, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared in a fur-lined mantle the color of storm clouds. The years of war had carved lean planes into his face. A king's face now, matured beyond the boy who once dreamed of emptying the Lannister halls. At his left flank paced Grey Wind, still mighty, though a ribbon of white scored his muzzle from the maces at the Green Fork. At his right waited his mother, Catelyn, eyes watchful, heart caught between memory and fear of all that might yet be lost. Down the Godswood path, the columns of Unsullied approached in quiet precision. Their bronze-rimmed shields gleamed pale, unsullied indeed by leaf or mud despite the long ride north. Behind them rode a sparser line of Dothraki, braids bound in thin bands of tin and silver rather than bells, for bells did not chime in cold so far from the red grasses of the great sea. Their horses snorted plumes of steam, hooves crunching over hoarfrost. And then she appeared. Daenerys Stormborn came astride a white mare, cloak of quilted ivory sweeping behind her. Silver-gilt hair braided in the fashion of both Bloodrider and Westerosi lady. She wore neither crown nor gems. The dragons were crown enough. Drogon soared above, a shadow swallowing twilight, while Rhaegal and Viserion wheeled closer to the forest, shrieking their eerie greetings to the direwolves below. When the dragons cried, Grey Wind stilled, not cowed, but wary, ears pricked as though hearing a language older than man or wolf. Daenerys reined in before the steps, boots crunching on Winterfell's stones as she dismounted. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to two young rulers who had known too much loss, standing in the live coal of each other's gaze. Snowflakes drifted between them. None melted on Drogon's scales overhead, though he glowed like banked embers. Robb descended, and the courtyard fell silent but for torchfire crackling. He knelt, War King of the North brought to one knee not in subservience but in shared purpose. "Lady Daenerys," he said, voice carrying above the hush, "Winterfell welcomes you." She inclined her head, neither above nor below him. "Your Grace, it is I who give thanks. Without the North, the dream of a freer realm dies unborn." Robb rose, the distance between them closed with a breath. Somewhere behind, Sansa exhaled, and Arya's fingers tightened on Needle's hilt. Jon Snow, rangy and brooding in Night's Watch black, though freed of vows, leaned forward as if he felt the turning of some greater wheel. Atop the ramparts, old Maester Luwin lifted a parchment, bearing the terms hammered out by Raven and Runner these past months. A hush more profound than any prayer settled while he read each clause. That Robb Stark and Daenerys Targaryen would wed in sight of gods both old and new. That the North would keep its ancient customs and king, yet stand united with the Queen of Dragons against the Iron Throne's cruelty. That any son or daughter from their union would be heir to both wolf and dragon. When the maester's voice concluded, a low murmur swept the crowd. Fear, hope, wonder, yet no voice rose in dissent. Too much blood had run into the northern snows, and too many songs of summer had been silenced. If marriage could forge a shield against the South's iron, let it be so. Robb extended his hand. Daenerys placed her gloved fingers in his, slim and strong from reins and sword hafts alike. Outside the walls, Drogon tilted his great horned head and roared, firelight bathing the sky in molten gold. Rhaegal answered with emerald thunder, and Viserion with a hiss like cracking ice. Music of a world reborn. Grey Wind threw back his head, and from the kennels came Ghost pale shape, then Nymeria's rangy form, and the smaller shadows of Shaggy Dog and Summer. The Direwolves assembled along the western parapet, eyes shining like twin moons. Between them and the dragons shimmered some invisible tide, an ancient kinship, where fire knew frost and beast met beast in silent accord. 2 days later, the wedding feast spread across the great hall. Though the ceremony itself waited for dawn beside the heart tree, tables groaned under roast boar rubbed with juniper, golden trout from the white knife, spiced eggs, and Dornish wine supplied at Tyrion Lannister's cunning insistence. For the imp had survived as hand by playing both bold and small, and had now fled King's Landing to pledge quill and wit to Daenerys' cause. But the hall's true wonder perched upon crossbeams overhead, 3 young dragons watching the revel with restless eyes. Their presence set tongues wagging. "They'll melt the rafters," old Nan fretted, ladling honeyed oat porridge into a gnarled bowl. "They'll scare the babes from sleep," said distant Karstark cousins. Others whispered, "Dragons bring summer wherever they go." Perhaps at last the North might know green longer than half a year. Closer to the dais, Arya Stark leaned on elbows beside Bran. Attentive though his legs could no longer carry him, Hodor stood at his back like a gentle keep. Across the table, Jorah Mormont, newly forgiven exile, watched Daenerys with a longing watered down to quiet devotion. Ser Barristan Selmy, white hair gleaming, stood sentinel behind her chair, the Queen's Guard of one. Robb touched Daenerys' wrist lightly whenever a new lord approached to bend knee, and she met each with steady gaze. Lord Wyman Manderly bowed so deep his jowls brushed his collar, promising fleets of spearmen should the dragons call. Grey John Umber slammed a fist to his chest, swearing to drink wildfire if anyone questioned the match, earning raucous howls from his men. All the while, Tyrion sketched the alliances in quick strokes upon stored parchment. Lord of Casterly Rock in name no longer, yet wielding gold in whispers. When the harpers struck up, the song of wings and winter, a hush fell again. Daenerys rose first, hand outstretched. Robb accepted, and together they danced beneath the dragon's gaze. Her skirts swirled like dawn-lit smoke, his boots sounded soft upon the stone. Around them, lantern light cut through drifting snow from high windows, and it seemed for a breath that Winterfell lay between seasons, balanced on the hinge of fate. The wedding dawn came chill and cloudless. They gathered in the Godswood, where the heart tree's face bled red sap against bark older than kingdoms. White petals lay like fallen stars on reflected ice. Maester Luwin, robed in gray, stood aside while a solemn septon, sent by River Run, murmured blessings of the seven. Yet when words turned to vows, Robb and Daenerys spoke over the weirwood roots themselves, as if the old gods and new must bear witness together. "I am Robb of House Stark," he said, gloved fingers entwined with hers, son of Catelyn of River Run and Eddard, who was called the Quiet Wolf. "I offer you my sword, my wolf's heart, and this crown of carved ice." "Damn, I am Daenerys of House Targaryen," she answered, "blood of the dragon, breaker of chains. I offer you my flame, my dragon's heart, and this crown of living fire." Ghost sat at Jon's side, fur glowing silver in the slanted sun. Drogon landed beyond the pool, wings folding like barbed gates. Between them lay Robb's direwolf crown, stitched fur circlet studded with dark iron, and Daenerys' circlet of Valyrian steel interlaced with red gold. They lifted each other's crown in turn, placing them upon brow with reverence. A breath of warmth swept the grove, Drogon exhaling a plume that melted frost from branches. In that shimmering air petals fluttered like embers, and the watchers gasped. Summer and winter, fire and frost, promises bound. At ceremony's end, Bran closed his eyes, touched bark, and felt roots humming with a power deeper than dragonfire. Somewhere distant, ravens screamed into flight. In the moons that followed, Winterfell transformed. Southron craftsmen enlarged the kennels for direwolf litters that seemed to sense the dragon's presence, as if greater blood quickened within them. Daenerys riders introduced forge masters to Carthian techniques for weaving leather strips into dragon harnesses, though no man dared saddle Drogon yet. At night, Arya stole to the training yard with Grey Wind's offspring, sleek shadow pups nearly grown, and whispered Valyrian words she learned at Daenerys' side, laughing when their ears flicked as though understanding. Robb and Daenerys often met in the solar above the library, blueprints spread between them. New sigil banners, half embroiderer's thread, half charcoal stroke. Plans for joint councils of wolf and dragon. Conversation ranged from tactics to trade routes, but more often drifted to shared wounds. Brothers slain, cities burned, innocents scoured away. In such moments, silence fell comfortable as furs around shoulders, and their joined hands found solace where words failed. Yet beyond the walls, eyes watched. In the golden gallery of King's Landing, young King Joffrey scoffed at ravens' tales until Cersei showed him a sketch of 3 dragons perched upon Winterfell's gate. The small council grew ashen. Even old Tywin, castellan of the Red Keep while his grandson wore the crown, felt his fingers tighten on the parchment. Farther east, in Braavos, the Iron Bank's archons recalculated risk. In Sunspear, Prince Doran traced a trembling finger across a map where dragon wings once shadowed. And on the wall, Lord Commander Jorah Mormont wrote in spare quill strokes to his son across frozen leagues. Watch the sky. Tranquility seldom lives long in Westeros. Snowmelt came early, rivers cutting free, and Tyrion's spies brought word that Balon Greyjoy had declared for the winning side, his own. Ironborn reavers struck along the rills, burning fisher huts and seizing young hostages. To the east, Stannis Baratheon's depleted host sailed from Dragonstone, red banners snapping, guided by fires that burned never to ash. Robb convened his war council in the Great Hall. The air thickened with candle smoke and tension. Lord Karstark urged immediate march south. Strike before Lion's Wake. Greatjon favored crushing the Ironborn at sea with dragonfire. Davos Seaworth, recently arrived under truce from Stannis, warned of Melisandre's shadow. Above them on the balcony, Bran watched through Raven's eyes, feeding his brother silent counsel by subtle sign. Daenerys raised her voice at last, clear, calm. Westeros is a 9-headed beast, each gnawing the other. We must choose one head first. She traced lines on a map. The neck, Moat Cailin, river runs crossroads. Hold these and no army passes to threaten the north. Robb nodded. Then we take Moat Cailin, cut the Kraken's arm, secure the Riverlands, and meet Stannis in the south before his Red Witch births more shadows. Their eyes met, not merely husband and wife now, but twin commanders shaping a single strategy. Later, on the ramparts under a moon like splintered ice, Robb spoke softly while the Direwolves paced below. You know they call us dreamers. Wolves and dragons cannot share the same sky. Daenerys's breath fogged the night. Then we changed the sky, she answered. Her hand slipped into his, fingers threading like woven steel links. Overhead, Drogon beat immense wings, sparks trailing from his jaws. Below, Grey Wind responded with a low guttural howl that rolled across the godswood, answered by Ghost and the younger wolves in chorus. The sound met Drogon's roar, twining in wild harmony, until the night shook with one voice forged of claw and flame. They marched when dawn smoldered scarlet. Unsullied spears glittered line on line. Northern longbowmen trudged in thick cloaks. Dothraki rode the ice-rimmed fields, war cries breath-plumed. Direwolves loped beside columns, tails high. Above, the dragons cast 3 shifting shadows, frost flashing to water where their fire-warmed winds touched. Crossing the swamplands of the Neck, they found Ironborn raiding parties stranded when tides retreated, ships grounded on mudflats. Drogon swept low, flame blooming across reeking sails. The smell of burnt salt and cedar filled the marshes. Northern outriders mopped up survivors, spears ringing shields in victory. Yet Daenerys decreed no Reaver's child should pay for father's crime. Orphans were led north under guard, to be fostered in keep and holdfast. Some Northerners balked. The Krakens will cut our throats in sleep. But Robb's word stood beside his queen's. Mercy where possible, steel where not. At Moat Cailin, rust-red mangonels rose among the crumbling towers. Ironborn held the causeway, yet their hearts faltered when dragons appeared. Still, battle-proof stubborn, ballistae barked, bolts the size of scythe blades whistling skyward. One caught Viserion along the wing joint. He shrieked, spiraling. On the parapet, Robb's rage flared, but Daenerys' command cut through chaos. "Hold!" She wheeled Drogon higher. Grey wind darted through arrow storms, harrying shield walls. As dusk bled across the bogs, Robb led a silent flanking through hidden fissure trails known only to Crannogmen. They struck under moonrise, Direwolves first, teeth flashing like white steel, then Northmen pouring through breaches. Within the hour, Moat Caelin's towers burned, red and gold against night. The causeway lay open, but not raised. The marshfolk had their passage still, and Viserion, wings splinted with pine slats, returned to skies before dawn. Victory sang across the campfires that night. Yet Robb saw the strain in Daenerys' face as she soothed Viserion's trembling. "He is young," she whispered, palm against warm scales. "I should have kept him clear." Robb knit his fingers through hers. "He learns as we do, through fire and pain. He will rise stronger." Daenerys looked up, eyes luminous. "As must we all," she said. Riverrun's red ivy walls came into sight before first snow of second winter. Lannister banners no longer flew there. Edmure had reclaimed his seat after the Blackfish's daring night assault the prior year. But scars of siege still marred towers. The Tully colors now flew beside the joined wolf-dragon banner. Yet Edmure met the royal pair with hands trembling. "Scouts report Tywin gathers near Harrenhal," he said. 50,000, maybe more. Sir Jaime rides in golden armor at the vanguard. Robb's jaw tightened. So the lion shows teeth. Daenerys, gaze fixed southward. "We cannot fight Tywin head-on while Stannis presses from the east. We need allies." "No." "Dorne?" offered Catelyn, stepping from behind Edmure. "Perhaps." Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "Or we need a blow so fierce it ends the war before alliances matter." Later, Tyrion found her among the quiet fish ponds, where willows trailed fingers into slow water. He leaned on a cane carved with snarling lion. "Looking for frogs, your grace." "Reflections," she replied. "I have counsel that may please neither wolf nor dragon, but might win us the realm." She arched a brow. "Speak plainly. Dragons break castles, wolves harry fields, men still hold hearts. If we can turn Jaime Lannister from his father." She laughed, soft and unexpected. "Kingslayer will not betray his blood." "Perhaps," Tyrion said, eyes shining. "But he has broken oaths before for love. And whispers say his love of late lies far from Casterly Rock." Daenerys studied the dwarf, weighing the risk. "Find your brother then. But if he draws sword against us, Drogon shall teach him new fires." Tyrion bowed, grin crooked. "I should like to watch that lesson. Though for his sake, I hope it proves unnecessary." Winter crept south in pale veils while war brewed. Letters flew, ravens blacking the sky. From the Eyrie, Lady Lysa wrote rambling pledges guarded by demands for sweet Robin's safety. From Oldtown, archmaesters debated omens. Dragons hatched, storms unending, red comets crossing memory. Beyond the wall, Tormund Giantsbane stalked the frost-bitten heights, and spoke of another awakening. Something stirring deep within frozen rivers where even others shunned. On a night of silent snow, Bran dreamed roots twisting under Winterfell, and saw a direwolf pup, white as northern dawn, suckling beside a newborn dragon, with scales of midnight and starlight. They lay curled in a nest of ash, breathing in unison. When Bran woke, he told Maester Luwin, who wrote the vision into ciphered scrolls for Robb and Daenerys. They read it by hearthfire. "A sign," Daenerys murmured. "Of what?" Robb asked. "That our lines may blend deeper than banners or blood," she said. Her hand covered her belly, unexpected and instinctive. His eyes widened, then softened. Their lips met, gentle as falling snow. Southward they rode once more, for Stannis had broken siege of King's Landing but failed to claim the throne, his fleet wrecked by wildfire and Lannister reinforcements. Now he marched inland, rallying stormlords battered by betrayal. Tywin advanced from Harrenhal, golden tide sweeping villages bare. Between them lay the Riverlands, broken, starving, yet defiant. At Fair Market, Wolf and Dragon host encamped. Scouts reported Tywin 5 days off, Stannis perhaps 7. The North Targaryen alliance would meet Lannister first. That dusk, as commanders pored over maps, the camp's outer fires flickered strange green. A boom like mountains colliding split the air. Drogon screamed overhead, diving. Robb burst from the command tent to see a wall of emerald flame racing along the dried reeds of the riverbank. Wildfire. Lannister saboteurs had loosed casks, borne by log rafts. Unsullied rallied in ranks. Shields interlocked. Northern archers loosed arrows of soaked linen to cut burning ropes. Dothraki rode parallel, sweeping stragglers with Arak. But Wildfire cared not for steel or skin. Flames leapt high, devouring defenses, and smoke rolled choking against the sky. Daenerys sprang to Drogon with Rhaegal circling. "Water!" she cried to Robb through the roar. He understood, racing to river shallows, where engineers had built weir dams for crossing wagons. Using axe and shoulder, Northmen broke the dams, water surging into trenches, quenching half the blaze. Then Drogon descended, wings thrumming like thunder. Rather than flame, he exhaled only hot wind, beating it across the wildfire, driving fumes back upon Lannister infiltrators caught unaware. Green fire lit their crimson cloaks as they broke, screaming. At dawn, the battlefield smoldered but held. Daenerys stood soot-smudged, silver hair streaked with ash. Robb wrapped furs around her shoulders. "Lion shows claws," he said. "The wolf dragon bears fangs," she replied, voice hoarse yet unbroken. In her arms he cradled a soot-blackened egg no larger than a clenched fist. One of Drogon's, jostled loose by battle's fury. The shell pulsed faint heat. She pressed it gently to Robb's palm. "For our firstborn," she whispered. Robb gazed upon the egg's dark red veins glimmering beneath cracks. His thumb stroked its curve with reverence. "A future none can bind." Tywin came for them 5 nights later. Standards high, trumpets sounding over frost-stiffened turf. Moonlight silvered plate and blade. He arrayed his legions across wide fields north of Acorn Hall, intending to press the wolf-dragon host against the river. But Robb had chosen ground where hidden ditches lay, masked by reed mats. As golden infantry advanced, they plunged waist-deep into icy water. Ranks buckled. Northern horns bellowed. Heavy cavalry crashed the flank, Greatjon at its head, shouting battle songs that rang like cracked bells. Unsullied phalanxes drove into foot soldiers pinned by mud. Dothraki surged around the enemy rear, Arak's scything horsetail plumes. Grey Wind and his offspring tore through the tumult, direwolf pack slashing at hamstrings. Above, dragons swept. Yet Daenerys kept Drogon's flame leashed until the Lannister trebuchets loosed a second barrage of wildfire barrels. Then she released him. Black wings closed, and a torrent of red gold fire incinerated the barrels mid-Arkdatki. Each burst like a sunflower of green, but Drogon's inferno engulfed the flames, devouring their fury. For the first time in living memory, wildfire bowed to dragonfire. In the chaos, Tyrion found Jaime's banner, crimson silk beaten with gold thread. He spurred his horse, weaving through melee toward his brother, shouting above the carnage. The Kingslayer turned, sword half raised. Recognition flashed. Hesitation followed. In that heartbeat, a Karstark spear thrust. Tyrion yanked Jaime aside, taking the shaft through his own thigh. Jaime roared and cut down the assailant, then hauled Tyrion onto his horse. They galloped toward the rear where wolf banners flew, straight into Robb Stark's personal guard. Steel met steel. Jaime dismounted, sword gleaming. Robb faced him, ice-blue eyes steady over a crimson-flecked wolf helm. No words, honor and vengeance hung alike between them. Blades clashed, sparks showering. Jaime pressed, quicker than rumor. But Robb countered with shield bash that rattled Lannister gold. The duel balanced on a hair until Drogon's shadow swept them both. Flames roared nearby. Men scattered. Robb lowered his sword. Enough. The lion's day is done. Jaime glanced to where Tywin's lines crumbled, banners falling like autumn leaves. He looked at Tyrion, pale and bleeding but alive. Something in the Kingslayer's eyes shifted, a loosening of golden chains. He knelt. Sword offered hilt first. Then let the realm have peace, he said, voice ragged. Robb accepted the sword, casting it groundward where dew hissed on smoldering steel. Peace starts with choice, he replied. When dawn bled copper over the field, the lion host lay routed. Tywin Lannister, captured beneath a fallen destrier, glared up at Daenerys astride Drogon, chains gilded by sunrise. She surveyed him as one might a dead king's crown. You butchered my niece and nephew, she said, voice flat. Sacked my city. Hunted my blood. Give me one reason to spare you. Tywin's pale eyes flicked to Robb beside her, kingship written in mud and dried blood. Mercy is the luxury of victors, he rasped. If you would rule, show it. Robb said nothing, but his gaze never left Daenerys. Slowly she raised her hand, palm outward. Drogon's maw opened. Flame licked the air, then ceased. Bind him. She ordered, let the realm judge the lion. Robb exhaled, tension easing, and reached for her hand. Their fingers twined before all captains and common foot. Around them, silence swelled. The hush that comes when one age ends and another begins. In that silence, winter's first true snow began to fall. Back in Winterfell, the weirwoods whispered of change. Bran dreamed again of wolf and dragon pup curled together. Now larger, their breaths weaving mist colder than ice and hotter than flame. Beneath them lay a nest of bones, old bones, kingly bones, turning to fertile soil. And in Daenerys' chambers, a babe quickened beneath her heart. Blood of the dragon, heart of the wolf. She placed Robb's hand upon her swelling belly, felt the flutter leap. Outside, Rhaegal roosted on the broken tower, and gray wind dozed below, head on paws, dreaming of fields where dragons soared beside direwolves through an endless northern summer. The realm did not yet know the name of this child, nor the wars yet to come, nor the dark beyond the wall that even dragonfire could not warm. But for a breathing space of winter twilight, hope unfurled its wings across Westeros, silver and unburnt. Howling into the snow-bright sky, and somewhere distant, in crypts beneath Winterfell, where kings of winter slept, ancient stone direwolves trembled, sensing the stir of something older than kings, older than dragons, a promise buried in frost and flame, waking at last. Kai. Wind swept low across the churned battlefield, where the snows of first winter mingled with mud and spilled lion-red blood, laying a quiet shroud over the wreckage of tents and wagons. In the hush that followed victory, crows picked at shattered shields, while the banners of House Stark and House Targaryen snapped together from makeshift poles, their silks soaked in frost. Dawn had passed into a hard, pale morning, and the world felt brittle, as if the slightest sound might crack the sky. Within a commandeered pavilion of striped, Myrish canvas, Daenerys Targaryen stood at a long table, strewn with maps and casualty rolls, her fingers tracing the routes that spiderwebbed south, toward King's Landing and east, toward Dragonstone. Her hair, unbound for the moment, spilled in damp silver strands over the fur lining of her mantle. Every so often she swept it back with a gesture that betrayed more fatigue than she would ever confess aloud. Beside her, Robb Stark leaned upon the edge of the table, gray eyes narrowed, lips pressed to a thoughtful line. The cut on his brow from yesterday's melee had been stitched but not salved, and a faint crimson seeped at the edge of the dressing, leaving a scarlet crescent like a wolf's tooth beneath his hairline. Ser Barristan Selmy stood behind Daenerys, white cloak smudged with ash and soot. Silent sentinel, At Robb's right shoulder brooded Greatjon Umber, arms folded across his chest, the bear pelt on his shoulders still dusted with snow. Across from them, Tyrion Lannister sat on a campstool, wounded thigh-bound and propped upon a wooden crate. Pain lined his face, but the tilt of his mouth showed a fierce wry humor as he flicked through parchment dispatches. The Kingslayer, Jaime Lannister, remained under heavy guard outside, unarmed save for the sharpness of his eyes. Daenerys set a small ivory marker onto the ink-blurred map, symbol of their host, its base painted half gray, half black. "Our scouts place Stannis a day's march from Maidenpool," she said, her voice low, almost toneless from exhaustion. "He has fewer than 12,000 swords left, though his red priestess's shadows make 10, seem 20. If he reaches the Trident unopposed, River Run will be threatened from the east, just as we secure it from the west. We cannot hold both banks without thinning our lines." Robb tapped the map lightly. "River crossings here, here, and here." His gauntleted finger paused at Oldstones, then drifted to Stonehenge. "If we fortify the fords with engineer crews, we can slow his advance to a crawl. The narrow sea winter storms already hamper his resupply. Force him to winter in the open, deny food and shelter, and the cold will finish what the wildfire began." Tyrion's mismatched gaze darted between them. "A sound plan, assuming Stannis does not hurl his entire force straight at us in a final gamble. Desperation makes men reckless." He pushed a curl of parchment toward Daenerys. A raven-scribbled message sealed with black wax shaped like a stag's head. "This arrived scant hours ago. He calls for parley." Robb's head lifted sharply. Parley? After all his threats? His breath plumed in the chill. It could be a ruse for assassination. Daenerys unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was neat, uncompromising. "In the sight of the Seven and the Lord of Light, I propose a meeting at the ruined sept of St. Maribald, atop the Maidenpool Hill, at sunset, 2 days hence. Come with no more than 10 companions, and I shall do the same. We may yet avert needless slaughter, or prove whose claim is true by battle between champions." She read the final lines twice, then set the letter down. "He invites single combat, or some test of lordly mettle." Greatjon barked a laugh. "Let me add him, your graces. One swing and the stag's crown will be split for the crows." Robb shook his head. "No." Stannis is a formidable swordsman and wields Lightbringer. If the tales are true, the blade burns with sorcery. His gaze moved to Daenerys, troubled, yet refusing the parley may drive stormlords who still waver into his camp. Tyrion coughed softly. "A parley can be many things. A stage for spectacle, a chance to sow doubt, a dagger held behind polite words. If you go armored in more than steel." He flicked his fingers. Ink smudged the bandages around them. "Take the dragons. A dragon perched on a sept's shattered dome speaks louder than a legion." Daenerys smiled without mirth. "Stannis will not parley under Drogon's shadow. He would see it as proof of my tyranny. And no, let him see what he will." Tyrion shrugged, pained by the movement. "Let the realm see. Fear saves lives when properly applied, my queen." Robb exhaled, crossing his arms. "I will stand beside you at the parley. If Stannis tries treachery, he dies." He glanced at the blade-song steel sword at his hip, the one Daenerys had gifted him after the fall of Moat Cailin. Blackened Valyrian steel, reforged into a longsword with a direwolf pommel wrapped in red leather. "But first we must judge our prisoners. The realm watches how we treat the lions now that they are defanged." "Them? Yeah." Outside, the crack of axes rang as soldiers felled a stand of pine for pyres. Tywin Lannister lay under heavy guard within a low tent, his proud face pale, his wrists shackled with thick iron bands. Nearby in makeshift cages were Alester Florent, 2 of Balon Greyjoy's captains, and a pair of red priests captured while tending Stannis' forward campfires. The wind carried the scents of blood and pine resin, of smoke and horse dung, of victory edged with grief. Robb and Daenerys left the war council and walked together between the tents. The sky clotted with gray clouds edging east, promising more snow. Gray wind fell into step beside them, wary amber eyes sliding across the sentries. Above, Drogon soared in slow spirals, black wings impossible against the pale sky. His shadow raced over the churned fields, over the dead lying stiff beneath frost, over the crows that flapped up, croaking. "Do you regret sparing Tywin?" Robb asked at last, voice almost lost to the wind. "No." She slid her hand beneath his elbow for warmth. "But I wonder if mercy can live beside justice in a land so broken." She tipped her head, pale hair fluttering. "Viserys would have burned him on first sight. My brother believed fear alone could rule." Robb's lips tightened. "We will show Westeros something better. Wolves and dragons keep their promises." They reached the prisoners' enclosure where guards knelt as their king and queen approached. Tywin was seated upon a wooden stool, back straight despite the chains. His eyes flicked upward, hard as garnets. Snow settled on the mane of golden hair at his temples. Even captive, he radiated command. Daenerys regarded him. Smoke gray cloak lifting in the wind. "Lord Tywin, you understand your crimes. The sack of King's Landing, the murder of Myrcella Baratheon, the attempted wildfire massacre. You have spilled enough innocent blood to drown the trident." Tywin's expression did not change. "Kings win wars, girl, by any means necessary. Myrcella was no innocent. She was a pawn. Pawns are sacrificed." Robb's eyes darkened. "A game whose pieces bleed. Pieces die, your grace. But you..." Tywin shifted chains, metal scraping. "You have won a grand victory. Kill me and you make a martyr for every hungry sellsword and vengeful cousin I have left. Spare me and you feed the legend that you are weak, merciful, naive." His mouth curved, a predator's smile though the trap's jaws held him. "Either path costs you." Daenerys said nothing for a length of heartbeats. Then she turned to Robb. "Sentence him." Robb drew a slow breath, the air crystallizing. "Lord Tywin Lannister, for crimes of treason, butchery and conspiracy against two rightful crowns, you are condemned to life in the Night's Watch. You will sail at once to Eastwatch and take the Black, there to live and die in service to the realm you sought to rule." Murmurs rippled through the guards. One or two voices hissed incredulously. Robb raised his hand. "Thus, you will defend the wall when winter's true enemy comes, and your strength will shield the land you bled. This is mercy and punishment both." Tywin's eyes narrowed. Surprise flickering like a candle inside a skull, but he inclined his head the slightest fraction. "As you command, your grace." His voice was cold iron. Yet beneath it, Daenerys sensed a different metal. Respect, perhaps. The grudging acknowledgement of a rival who expected fire and received ice. Later, the decision rang across every camp. Some Northmen grumbled. They had lost fathers to Lannister hot pitch. But others nodded approval. Exile to black frost might weigh heavier than a swift blade. The Night's Watch, desperate for hardened men, sent Raven reply at once. They would take whatever hands came. The afternoon passed in tense preparations. Jaime Lannister was escorted to a separate tent, unshackled yet surrounded by Stark outriders. Gray robes awaited him, the first stage of remorse. Yet he spent the hours staring at his golden sword hand, flexing fingers that still craved a hilt. Tyrion hobbled to Jaime near dusk, leaning on a crutch. "I save your life, you sit here brooding." A Lannister thanks poorly, it seems. Jaime looked up, expression ragged. "I did not ask saving. And yet, you are saved. Tywin lives too, though he goes north. Father at the wall. There is justice in that, you must admit." Tyrion's smile fell crooked again. "Join us now, brother. Break free from chains of lion and crown alike. Help forge something new." Bam! Jaime's throat worked. Something new. He stared at the crimson sunset bleeding over torn banners. "I swore to protect the innocent once. I might remember how." He extended his wrist. Tyrion clasped it, their shackled lineage interlaced with threads of possibility. When night came, Daenerys walked alone to the field where Drogon perched amid the skeletons of siege engines, his eyes like burning coals. She carried the soot-dark dragon egg wrapped in lamb's wool. Steam rose from between the shell's faint cracks, as though a slow heart beat inside. She knelt before Drogon and laid the egg at his talons. "Guard this," she whispered, "until the stars fall." Drogon lowered his head, warm embers exhaling through nostrils. The egg glimmered as if reflecting distant fire. In that moment, Daenerys felt the pulse of every Targaryen before her, the old blood singing under her skin. Gallant Aegon upon Balerion, proud Rhaenys and Vhagar, doomed Rhaegar by the trident's flow. All their hopes, loves, agonies thrummed like a living song inside that fragile shell. She sensed footsteps behind her, soft, deliberate. Robb joined her, cloak rustling. He looked upon Drogon with steady calm. "The egg's heat grows each night. It may hatch sooner than you think. Then the realm will behold a new dragon with the spring thaw." She rose, brushing snow from her knees. "And with it, perhaps, a new future. We must win the present first." He offered his hand. She took it. "Tomorrow we ride for the parley." Dawn's light bled pale across rolling hills when the Queen's party set forth. Daenerys, Robb, Tyrion, Sir Barristan, Jon Snow, come south as envoy of the Night's Watch, along with Deva Seaworth, great in stature despite lost fingers, Lady Brienne in blue steel, and Maester Luwin for witness. 10 riders, no more. Above them, only Rhaegal flew. Drogon remained to guard the camp. Viserion, his wings still mending, perched at Riverrun's rookery. The Sept of St. Maribald was a shell, roof burned away by reavers decades past, walls cracked, but its round nave still crowned the hill like a bleached skull. Cold wind roared through empty arches, carrying faint scents of salt from the distant Bay of Crabs. Snowflakes spiraled in the air. Stannis' party arrived moments after the wolf dragon host stepped beneath the nave's shadow. Stannis in black steel, fiery sword Lightbringer at his hip, Melisandre cloaked in red that glowed like embers, Sir Axel Florent, half a dozen stormlords grim and gaunt. 10 paces of trampled snow separated the two groups. The ruins felt like a crucible, stones etched by frost and old ash. Stannis' gaze flicked from Robb to Daenerys. "So the rumor is true. A northern pup weds a dragon queen." His voice sounded hoarse, as though scraped by salt winds. "An alliance born of fear." Robb answered calmly. "Born of hope. Our people bleed. Your war with King's Landing failed. Join us. Help heal instead of burn." Stannis did not soften. "I am rightful king. My brother's heirs were bastards. The throne is mine by law. Bend the knee and I promise clemency." Tyrion's laugh echoed, brittle as ice cracking. "And if they refuse?" Another shadow whispering through the dark to slit throats. Melisandre's red eyes fixed upon Tyrion. "The night is dark and full of terrors." Jon Snow stepped forward, black cloak whipping. "Other terrors walk beyond the wall. Terrors neither crown nor comet can deny. Winter falls. We have seen the dead rise." He met Stannis' stare unflinching. "You would waste men upon a chair when the true war awaits." Stannis studied Jon. "Flint to flint. You speak boldly for a bastard." Then, as if recognition sparked, he leaned closer. "Snow, you are Ned Stark's blood." He cast a bitter glance toward Robb. "Tell your brother, I fought beside your father in war. I will not bow to his son." Daenerys stepped between conflict. "Bloodchild or not, Jon speaks the truth. The long night stirs. I offer you a new compact. Pledge your banners to us, and when the snows recede, the Iron Throne shall be decided by council of all great houses, chosen, not seized. The war can end here." A hush. Snowflakes hissed upon Lightbringer's steel. Stannis' jaw clenched. Behind him, Melisandre's voice threaded the wind. "The flames show a great wolf devouring the sun, a dragon wing shielding the moon. Yet the stag stands upon a precipice of ash crowned by shadow." Her hand lifted, fingertips glowing crimson as if lit from within. "The Lord of Light's will is clear. The stag must fall for dawn to break." Robb's hand dropped to his sword. Sir Barristan mirrored. Tension thrummed like a drawn bow. Then Stannis raised his arm. "Halt. Enough, lady. No blood here." He turned to Daenerys, his eyes weary. "If I yield, what becomes of my men? They become the realm's men." She replied, "Fed, housed, and sent north come spring to face the darkness." "And the Red Woman?" "Her faith is her own," Daenerys said. "But she wields shadows. Shadows have no place in open sun." Stannis exhaled a gust that steamed in the cold. "You would see her gone. I would see her followers fight with swords and honor, not sorcery born of blood." She held his gaze. "Choose, Stannis. Live, and help us save this world, or cling to ashes of a crown." The wind howled through shattered arches. Snow whirled in eddies around them, millers' ghosts of flowery powder. At length Stannis unclasped his black helm and let it fall into the snow. He knelt. Slowly. Knees struck ground with a crunch. "Before gods old and new, I lay down my claim until the long night is ended." His voice cracked like ice. "I will serve beneath the wolf and dragon." A collective breath shuddered through the ruins. Robb stepped forward, unsheathed his Valyrian blade, touched the flat gently to Stannis' bowed shoulder. "Arise, Lord Stannis, General of the Winter Host." Melisandre's face contorted, eyes blazing. "You choose darkness over light." Stannis rose, turned to her. "I choose life for men." He took Lightbringer from its sheath. Its edge glowed faintly, yet no flames danced this day. With one stroke he severed the ruby choker at her throat. The gem fell, shattering. A hiss escaped her lips, crimson as the stone. Snow swallowed the fragments. She backed away, cloak whipping wild, then fled down the hill, red fabric flashing like a bleeding wound against the white. The moment stretched, stunned. Daenerys inclined her head to Stannis. "You have chosen well." Together, they left the crumbling sept, descending into drifting snow with new purpose. Word of Stannis' surrender raced on raven wings to every holdfast. Stormlords once split between Stag and Crown now looked north. Some balked, others followed. In Dorne, Prince Doran smiled faintly behind his parchment. Dragon and wolf had drawn the flame of their own rival. In the Vale, pettier Baelish sharpened quieter schemes, calculating new faults to pry. Winter deepened. Robb and Daenerys withdrew their united host to Harrenhal, whose blackened towers gave shelter from cold winds. There they wintered, forging order from cracked stone. Blacksmiths hammered northern iron into dragonwing hilts. Unsullied drilled Stormland recruits amid echoing courtyards. Healers mixed Dornish peppers with Maester's drafts to ward lung rot. Direwolves paced high parapets, their howls answering distant dragon calls that rolled over the lake like thunder. Within the Wailing Towers, Solar Daenerys held council each day with Robb, Tyrion, Stannis, Jon, and a growing assembly of lords. They drafted decrees. A realm-wide levy of grain for the Night's Watch. Road patrols to protect small folk from winter bandits. A charter for a great council after the long night, to decide the Iron Throne by vote. Quills scratched. Voices rose. There were disputes. Dothraki wandering liberty versus Northern law. Stormlords refusing oaths to foreign savages. Maesters fretting over supply. But the council held, threaded by Robb's calm mediation and Daenerys' quiet steel. Some nights, after parchment and ink bled into candle ends, the Queen and King walked the ruined halls of Harrenhal. Snow drifted through broken ceilings and ghostly shafts. Wolves' eyes glowed from archways. Shadows of dragons flickered across walls like phantoms of Aegon's fury. Daenerys would pause, fingers on Robb's wrist, sensing the babe inside quicken at the echo of ancient fires. Robb would press his palm to chilled gray stone, as though grounding them both against that savage past. Dreams came to Bran in Winterfell's rebuilt bell tower. Through Raven's wings he flew south, across iced rivers and charred fields, to lurk within Harrenhal's weirwood heart. He saw his brother and Daenerys stand before that tree, whose carved face wept black sap as if mourning lost kings. Bran felt it speak, a whisper that twisted through root and vein. Winter's end lies in dragon's flame, tempered by wolf's howl. In the dungeons below the vast ruin, Jaime Lannister, released from bonds, walked the hall with Brienne of Tarth. She trained him, drilling every morning in the yard. His shield arm grew strong where his pride had faltered. At night, he dreamt of a glowing green courtyard, where children laughed unafraid of fire. One evening, he approached Robb Stark by the hearth. "I wish to swear sword and honor to House Stark," Jaime said. "My life, in exchange for what my house took." He knelt, casting golden sword aside. Silence hung. Robb looked to Daenerys. She gave a slight nod. Decision shared. Robb drew steel, tapped Jaime's shoulder. "Rise then, Sir Jaime, Knight of the New Realm. Serve and atone." Jaime's eyes glimmered, not with pride but humility. The egg beneath Drogon's guard grew hotter until one night, during a whiteout storm, a crack snaked across its surface. The black dragon lifted the egg gently into his mouth and flew to the highest tower, where Daenerys waited by instinct more than word. She climbed the spiral stair, Robb behind her, torches flickering. At the top chamber the egg burst, light flared. Half fire, half dawn. From shards crawled a hatchling small as a deerhound, scales silver shot with midnight blue. Its eyes opened, violet as Daenerys' own. It squealed, plumes of white smoke curling. She gathered it in fur-wrapped arms. Robb set a steadying hand on her back, awed. The hatchling licked her cheek with a tongue like warm velvet, then chirped at Robb, head tilting. Gray wind howled far below. The little dragon answered with a faint trill. In that exchange of howl and trill, something old bridged between species, a compact older than old Valyria, renewed upon winter stone beneath blackened sky. Daenerys whispered a name. Dalar, Dort. In old Valyrian, born of frost and flame. Snow fell thick around the tower. Rhaegal swooped, landing upon a buttress. Curious, Drogon posted above, wings mantled protectively. The tiny dragon nestled against Daenerys' breast, heartbeat rapid. She felt tears freeze along her lashes, though her skin burned with joy. Spring lay beyond months of hardship, but within that wind-lashed night, hope hatched anew. When word spread through camp, men knelt in snow to pray, some to the Seven, some to old gods, some to Urelor despite Melisandre's flight. More than prayer, they saw omen. Dragons multiply, life persists. But bearded Bowen Marsh, steward of Eastwatch, sent raven of darker news. Whites in numbers not seen since the time of the last hero had assaulted the Shadow Tower, breaching the outer palisade before dragonglass arrows drove them back. He begged for aid. At dawn, Robb summoned every captain. "We ride north," he declared. "The Night's Watch stands, or we all fall." Stannis nodded, gaunt cheeks red from wind. "I will lead my Stormlords through the gift to Castle Black." Jon Snow turned, ghost-white direwolf padding silent. "The wall will need dragonfire." His gaze fixed on Daenerys. "Can Scholar be flown?" "Not yet," she said. "But Drogon and Rhaegal will burn whites where they swarm. Viserion will follow once healed." Tyrion limped forward, leaning on bronze cane. "And I shall remain at Harrenhal to oversee grain caravans and hold River Run." His smile twitched. Someone must keep the lions from reclaiming their roar. The camp rumbled with readiness. Smiths forged spears tipped with obsidian hauled from Dragonstone by Stannis' fleet. On the banks of the gods, eye carpenters shaped sledges for hauling winter stores. Unsullied polished shields bright as moons. Dothraki braided hair with shards of dragonglass. Jaime drilled with northern guards, golden hair chopped short beneath a crow feather cloak. Before departure, Robb and Daenerys stood on Harrenhal's highest parapet to address their army. Snow gusted sideways, stinging cheeks. Robb's voice rang fierce and clear. "Men of the realm, winter's true foe gathers beyond the wall. I ask not Northman or Stormlander, Dothraki or Free City exile, only that you stand as children of the same sun. We march to defend the living." "Bain." Daenerys raised her arms. Dragons answered, Drogon's roar rolling like thunder, Rhaegal's echo emerald, tiny scholars chirped silver against the wind. "I was born in fire and storm," she said. "Many called me breaker of chains, But chains yet remain, in fear, in hate, in icy death that would bind all forever. We break those chains together. Her cloak swept back, revealing the swell of her womb. For the children yet unborn, for the songs yet unsung. Ride with me, and we forge a dawn no darkness can devour. Men. And so, a roar rose so vast it seemed to shake Harrenhal's cursed stones. Swords lifted, spear butts hammered, and Direwolves howled, as if calling an older legion. Above, dragons wheeled, flame-licking gray clouds. They marched 3 days later, an exodus of banners and hoofbeats, wagons laden with grain, barrels of lamp oil, crates of dragon glass, spears bristling, shields gleaming, Direwolves threading the column. Snow thickened until distances blurred white. Scarves wrapped frost-burned faces, hoar ice etched beards. Yet songs carried. Northmen singing, the last hearth's lament, Stormlanders chanting sea's shanties, Dothraki ululating battle cries that startled crows from ice-numb limbs. On the road through the neck, Lady Lyanna Mormont, barely beyond girlhood, met the host with 200 hardy spears. She rode direwolf hide, eyes alight. House Mormont follows wolf and dragon, she declared, to the world's bitter edge. At Moat Cailin Tywin Lannister passed them southward, bound for the wall by black brothers in sable cloaks. He paused when the column parted, meeting Robb's gaze across the causeway. For one heartbeat, each saw the other, not as enemy, but as man drawn by different stars. Tywin bowed his head in curt salute, then rode on into gathering night. Past Last Hearth, the air grew iron-sharp, snow knee-deep. Scouts reported white packs wandering the King's Road, devouring deer and frozen travelers alike. Drogon descended in fury, black flame incinerating masses of dead that writhed like maggots. The soldiers saw corpses burned to drifting ash that glowed blue before fading. Fear mingled with awe. Yet for every charred knot of undead, more converged from tree lines, eyes pale as moonlit glass. As they neared the wall, the sky glowed a strange aurora. Veins of cold blue light rippling above the frozen ramparts. Viserion first flight since healing painted that light gold when his pale fire met the sky. Scholar rode tucked beneath Daenerys' cloak, emerging to hiss at snowflakes like a child tasting life. Castle Black's courtyards bustled under makeshift halls of fir and pine. Jon reunited with Samwell Tarly and Dolorous Edd. They embraced grimly. Mormont greeted the arriving banners with hollow eyes. 300 brothers remained from 700. Yet hope rekindled at sight of unsullied precision. Stormland pikes, Dothraki cavalry shivering, but grinning at the sheer height of the wall. That night they feasted on salt pork and hardtack inside ringing caverns. Robb spoke with Jeor Mormont until candles guttered. Daenerys walked atop the wall itself, gaze lost northward. Vast white emptiness stretched beyond a lantern glow. Scholar peeped from her collar, small wings beating chill air. Above, the aurora shimmered, and within its ghostly light she thought she glimpsed shapes moving far off. Glints like blades of crystal, too ordered for mere snowdrifts. Footsteps joined her. Jon Snow leaned on the ice-slick rampart. "They're out there. I know," she whispered. "And they're coming." Behind them, two great shadows settled. Drogon and Rhaegal, claws biting into ice. Their eyes burned twin furnace reds in the dark. The air smelled of smoke and frost. Jon stared, half in dread, half in wonder. "If dragons are fire made flesh," he murmured. "What are direwolves?" Robb's voice drifted from the stairwell. The beating heart of winter made loyal. He stepped out, cloak flapping, gray wind at his heel. The direwolf padded forward, nose to Skalar's snout. The hatchling chirped. Gray wind wafted softly. Human and beast held breath, while dragonling and direwolf touched. Fire and frost, heat and chill, and did not recoil. A wind rose beyond the wall, carrying a sound like distant ice cracking. Jon's gaze snapped north. On the horizon shimmered faint blue fires, marching. Ghost materialized at his side, fur standing on end. Drogon rumbled low. Scholar squeaked, wings flaring. The enemy had sensed their gathering. Far below in his lonely cell, Bran Stark woke from a dream of roots piercing ice deeper than mountains. He whispered to the dark, "It begins." At dawn a horn blast shattered sleep. One long note for brothers returning. Shadow Tower riders hailed the host. Weary, armor rimed with frostbite, bearing news that dead things massed in the Frostfang valleys, an army the size of kingdoms. They would reach the wall within a fortnight. Robb strode into the strategy hall, fire in his step. "Then we prepare." He unfurled a new standard, Direwolf entwined with three-headed dragon, both emblazoned upon a rising sunburst. "We name this Dawn's Watch," he declared. Swords rang in assent. Daenerys stood beside him. Scholar perched on her shoulder, tiny claws gripping leather. "Let the world forget houses and crowns. Let it remember only that we stood together." She held Robb's hand above the table, and that a wolf loved a dragon. And in their love, the dawn was forged. Through tall windows, the first true light of morning pierced storm clouds, striking their joined hands, setting Valyrian steel and dragon scale aglow with one fiery promise. Outside, men and women of 7 kingdoms and more gathered along the wall's base. Spears upright, arrows nocked, shield edges lined like glowing teeth. Direwolves prowled ramparts. Dragons circled overhead. Beyond the frost-hazed horizon, the dead marched, endless, unstoppable. Yet in the hush before the storm, heartbeat met heartbeat. Wolf, dragon, man, child, unborn future, and the wall itself seemed to tremble, not with fear but with fierce, rebellious hope. And hope, like dragonfire, spreads. Oh, Kai. Snow hissed against the wall like teeth on whetstone, grinding in restless gusts that rattled the wooden hoardings and set the old iron chains to clinking high above the courtyard. Winter's breath seeped through every crack of castle black, frosting candle flame and numbing fingers that tried to mend armor seams by dying lamplight. Yet the citadel did not sleep. Hammers rang at all hours in the forge where Northmen and Stormlanders labored side by side, beating dragonglass blades into spearheads that glimmered ink-black and hungry. Barracks bustled with fresh-shorn Dothraki, proudly strutting in fur overcoats for the first time in their lives, while unsullied drilled beneath the storeroom overhangs. Movements crisp despite snow that reached mid-cap. Robb Stark moved among them like a wolf threading a pack, offering a word here, a nod there. Sleeves rolled, hands blackened from helping at the bellows. He took his meals beside common spearmen on rough benches, drinking weak ale that had half froze in the barrel, listening more than speaking. In every exchange he sought the cadence of fear, where it festered, where courage faltered. When he sensed it, he placed his scarred hand on a man's shoulder, met his eyes and said nothing, because nothing spoken could match the weight of shared silence between those who understood death was walking toward them. Atop the king's tower, Daenerys stood with Sir Barristan and Davos Seaworth, hood thrown back so the wind lashed her braids about her cheeks. Scholar perched on her right forearm, wings still stunted but growing stronger, beating against the gale in short bursts that lifted the hatchling from her sleeve, before he settled again with a rasping churr. Rhaegal glided overhead, emerald scales dark against the bruise-colored twilight. Drogon loomed beyond the far ridge, indistinct but magnificent, a black god crouched upon rough spires of ice-rimmed stone. Below, the fathom-thick gate groaned open just wide enough to admit a column of weary men from Eastwatch. They brought Tywin Lannister among them, wrapped in sable, but bearing himself with unbowed composure, despite the cold that turned his breath to glass. Brothers of the Watch whispered about the lion come to stand sentinel at the end of the world, but the old lord's gold-flecked glare silenced any jibe before it formed. Jon Snow met the newcomers in the outer yard. He clasped Tywin's arm as though greeting one lord to another, and guided him toward the old Flint Hall, which now served as a command center. When Daenerys descended, she found Tywin warming hands over a charcoal brazier. eyes flicking across the map stones, while Jor Mormont recited grim tallies. 10,000 living souls now crowded inside Castle Black, and its ramshackle outer camps. Provisions for 3 moons, if strictly rationed. 47 horses fit for cavalry. 2 ravens left. Not enough, Mormont muttered, stroking his white beard. If the wall falls, we cannot feed half this number fleeing south. It will not fall, Daenerys said. Her voice filled the room like kindling catching spark. We will carry the fight beyond the wall before they swarm our gates. Tywin's brows arched. March north into the heart of the storm. Your people will freeze before they face the foe. Better to hold behind stone and ice. Robb entered then, brushing snow from his shoulders, and heard the words. Stone and ice did not stop the dead at Hardhome, he answered, crossing to the fire. Walls keep out armies with pulse and breath. These creatures are neither. Tyrion clapped a mitt on the map rail, leaning heavily on his cane. Then we must decide where to break them. We've scouted the Fist of the First Men. High ground, but scant wood for fires, and too little fresh water once the snows drift. The gorge narrows the approach, yet we risk flanking if they come over the ice lakes. Then, Jon pointed to a chalk mark farther north, where pines sprouted thick on a ridge known as the Shivering Steppe. There, a glacial shelf drops 200 feet to the valley floor. One choke point leads up, a defile wide enough for 6 abreast. Dragonglass pits line those slopes already, work of the children long ago, maesters say. If we can lure the dead into that channel, Drogon and Rhaegal can scorch the rear ranks, while archers rain dragonglass. Then Darwaro. Stannis, arms folded, considered. A furnace trap. Risky, but with fortifications. His gaze slid to Tywin. And with an engineer who built the scorpions that breached Storm's End. Tywin's expression barely shifted, yet something steeled behind his eyes. If I build ramparts, I command the labor. You will have it, Robb said. Under Night's Watch oversight. Tywin dipped his head. The faintest concession. Then we begin at dawn. That night, the castle rang with axes as pine logs were felled and dragged through the tunnel, to the north side of the wall. Dothraki ponies balked at the scent of the ice field, so they were led by northerners holding torches, singing old dirges that told of the first men who carved out hearths beneath glacier and star. The Unsullied marched in grim silence, forming human chains to haul timber along sled runners greased with seal fat. Even maesters wielded saws. Steel met wood, sparks flying where frozen knots resisted. Above the clamor, Bran Stark's ravens roosted on the crenellations, black silhouettes against the moon. Through their wings he watched the forest beyond the wall. Tall dead pines rattled as unseen shapes brushed past. Eyes like shards of winter sky gleamed from shadows, then vanished. An urgency prickled down Bran's spine, echoing in the roots of the weirwoods he touched in dream. He sent his mind through snowy ground, seeking webs of living heat, and found so few. The land itself seemed drifting into numbness. He whispered through the raven's throat. One croak, then another, until Samwell Tarly, trudging by with a crate of pitch, glanced up. Tell Jon. The bird rasped in a voice half human, half breeze. Tell Jon. The heart of ice stirs. Sam dropped the crate, heart hammering, but he scooped up the raven, folded it beneath his cloak, and stumbled for the king's tower where Jon kept vigil. Jon listened as Bran's words spilled in Sam's fearful stammer. He looked to Ghost, whose fur bristled though no sound touched mortal ear. We ride tonight, Jon said. Within the hour he led a scouting party through the postern gate. 10 rangers on shaggy garrons, ghosts of black against starlight, with Ghost padding silent at Jon's stirrup. The forest swallowed them, leaving Castle Black a distant glow. Daenerys watched their departure from her window. She pressed her palm against the glass, felt chilly condensation. In her other arm Skalar coiled, sensing the tension in her heartbeat. She stroked the hatchling's spine until his eyes half closed. Her child within her shifted as though in empathy, 2 lives moving in unison with the dragons above. Ser Barristan entered quietly, helm beneath his arm. You should sleep, your grace. I will, Once I hear the first horns at dawn." She turned to him. "Tell me truthfully, Barristan, will our line hold?" The old knight met her gaze without flinching. "It will hold as long as you and the king stand. That is enough." "Is it?" she whispered. "I wonder how many tales end on faith when steel fails." Barristan smiled, weary but unbowed. "Tales end when no one lives to speak them. We will live." Joan's company rode hard through moon-silvered drifts, weaving between spears of shadow. After 3 hours, Ghost halted, ears flat. The steeds nickered, showing white eyes at the darkness ahead. Jon signaled halt. The rangers spread in a half circle, drawing swords that glimmered with dragonglass along their fuller. They smelled it a heartbeat later, wrought beneath hoarfrost, sweet-sour and unnatural. From tree line to the left slouched a shape, man-sized but bent, arms stiff like broken toys. Blue orbs replaced eyes. It shrieked, a sound of frozen reeds snapping. Ghost sprang, tearing its throat. The creature flailed, silent now, yet still clawing. Jon's dragonglass dagger punched through its ribs. It shattered as if made of brittle sugar, fragments scattering in the snow. Another figure appeared, then 3, 10. Walking dead in ragged nights watch blacks, some still bearing shattered swords fused to bone by ice. Jon's men formed ranks, bows singing, shafts of obsidian whistling. Wherever black glass struck, bodies burst into hoarfrost. But for each felled wight, 2 more emerged behind, as though the forest itself birthed them. Then came the cold, a wave of air so bitter it crystallized breath into needles. Snow stilled, falling mid-air. Silence pressed upon the men, crushing. A tall rider glided from darkness, astride an elk-like beast with antlers of ice. Its face shone curiously beautiful, carved from blue glass, crowned with spears of frosted quartz. Eyes burned a glacial flame. In its hand glimmered a spear of purest frost. Jon felt his heart seize. Another, the first he had seen since Hardhome, stared at him as if in recognition. Ghost snarled but stepped back, tail flicking uncertainly. The other extended its spear, and where the tip hovered, frost spidered across Jon's breastplate. He raised Longclaw, Valyrian steel dark and rippling, and parried. The clang rang like bells underwater. Sparks of blue frost burst where steel met ice. Jon shouted for retreat. This was no skirmish they could win. But before horses could wheel, a roar shredded the silence. Drogon descended in a hurricane of wings, fire spilling from his jaws. The flames crashed among the trees, igniting resin-rich pine and pillars of golden fury. Whites, shriveled, blackening. The other wheeled its mount, retreating with uncanny grace beyond the fire line, vanishing into smoke swirl. Jon's men galloped for safety, Ghost loping beside, and Drogon shadowed them to the wall. As they reached the gate, horns blew thrice, rangers returning. Robb and Daenerys stood at the threshold, lanterns painting their faces in amber worry. Jon dismounted, breath heaving. They are close. Less than a day's march. An other led them. Robb set his jaw. Then the battle comes sooner than we hoped. Tywin arrived, flanked by builder captains. The causeway to the Shivering Steppe is ready. Trenches filled with pitch wait along the ridge. Daenerys glanced skyward where Drogon soared. We strike at dawn. The trap must hold. Dawn broke, a wan smear on horizon. Columns formed outside the gate, banners stiff in the killing cold. Unsullied fronted, each segment with locked shields. Dragonglass halves embedded in spear points. Behind marched Northmen in boiled leather and iron, Stormlanders in bright surcoats darkened by snowmelt. Dothraki with arcs strapped to backs and fresh supply of curved dragonglass knives at their belts. Direwolves trotted restless. Grey Wind, Ghost, Nymeria, Summer, Shaggy Dog. Each larger now, fed on war and winter, eyes reflecting pale dawn fire. At the column's center rode Daenerys on a barded horse draped in wolfskin and quilted silks, her belly rounding beneath mail reinforced with leather scales. Scholar clung to a perch at her shoulder, tethered by a braided silver cord, yet already testing its spread wings. To her left, Robb sat astride a rangy gray destrier, visored helm shaped to a snarling direwolf. Their hands brushed briefly before they urged their mounts to a trot. Above, Drogon and Rhaegal sailed parallel, wing beats sending plumes of loose snow spiraling. Viserion limped aloft in their wake, slower but eager. Bran's ravens flocked after them, a scatter of black motes. They reached the shivering steppe by midday, a sheer drop overlooking a frozen valley. Tywin's trenches glistened below the ridge, pits of tar and straw, covered by wooden grates disguised with snow-dusted branches. At either flank rose timber palisades bristling with dragonglass stakes, hastily erected yet formidable enough to funnel any horde into the central choke point. Beyond, the valley floor stretched wide, glistening like a tarnished mirror, hemmed by distant white ridges from which the dead would come. Troops settled behind low earthworks. Catapults, old Night's Watch torsion engines reinforced with iron, sat loaded with barrels of pitch and coiled dragonglass flechettes. Archers strung bowstrings waxed against freezing. Limbs creaked but held. Silence settled heavy. Breath plumed. Hearts thudded. Robb walked the line, visor up so men could see his face, words steaming. "Hold until the fire signal. Trust your brothers. Trust the glass. Trust yourselves." He clasped Arya's forearm. Arya now stood among the archers, needle at her hip and a new longbow in her grip. She met his gaze with fearless gray eyes. Nearby, Sansa tended the wounded quarters, handing out mulled wine steeped with herbs, gowns layered under maesters' robes. Their mother's spirit seemed to hover with them, though distant. Daenerys climbed the observation scaffold Tywin had built at the ridge peak. It gave her full view of valley and palisade. She inhaled, tasted iron in the air. The unborn child kicked softly, as if sensing the blood about to flow. Then horns wailed from far east, an echoing cry carried by wind. Snow shook from branches, wolves lifted snouts. The white horizon darkened, not with storm clouds but with forms, ranks upon ranks of dead, so many they seemed to be the moving ground. At their fore rode the other Jon had seen, spear upright like a pale banner. Ice spiders scampered among feet, chittering across drifts. Giant wights trudged behind, flesh hanging in icy tatters, each step a thunder. Nearer they came. Every breath seemed to still. The front ranks of wights reached the mouth of the defile, and as if guided by unseen will, they pressed inward, 6 abreast, groaning in silence. The trap swallowed them, lines funneling into the narrow. Daenerys raised her flare torch, flames licked green with malachite salts. She paused, wait for the line to thicken, then swung downward. Tyrion, manning a catapult lever side, yanked the release. A barrel soared, smashing upon rock mid-defile, spewing pitch that burst into roaring fire when a flaming arrow from Arya found it. The mouth of the gorge became an oven. Wights ignited, staggering back into those behind, spreading flame through their ranks like wax. Drogon dove, jaws unhinging. Red gold inferno cascaded into that cauldron, sending up a bloom of incandescent heat, so intense snow melted meters away. Rhaegal followed, emerald fire twisting serpentine to seal the gorge exit. Smoldering corpses piled chest high, but still they climbed. Flame-licking bones that did not know pain. The other raised its frost spear, light refracting. With a sharp motion, it hurled. The spear whirled upward, trailing razor frost. Drogon banked. But the spear grazed his left wing, frost spreading crystalline fractals across membrane. The great dragon roared, veering up, wing beat lopsided. Daenerys' heart stuttered. She whirled to Robb. He signaled cavalry. Dothraki thundered down the ridge's inner track, whooping war cries that shattered the hush. At their head rode Jeor Mormont, white beard streaming, swinging a Valyrian axe. They crashed into wights, spilling around the gorge's blazing mouth. Arx cleaved ice-stiff limbs. Dragonglass etched black smoke where it touched. Tywin's engineers triggered concealed lever arms. The wooden grates over the tar pits collapsed beneath weight of charging undead. Cadavers plunged into viscous pitch. Torches rained on them, and blue-flamed bodies flailed like living comets. Yet the dead were endless. Over fallen brethren, they climbed. Giant wights grabbed burning stakes, hurling them over ramparts. One flaming timber smashed into the palisade where Bran had guided saplings into living barricade. The wood steamed, but held. Near the left flank, Shaggy Dog fought beside Northman from last hearth, jaws closing on a skeletal stag's throat. A second wight stabbed his haunch. The direwolf yelped, yet turned, crushing the attacker. Robb saw and bellowed orders. Karstark pikemen surged to shield the direwolf, dragging burning nets to clear the flank. Scholar shrieked, launching from Daenerys' perch on instinct older than speech. Tiny wings beat furiously until the hatchling landed on a wight's helmet. He spat a thin ribbon of pale fire, hot enough to sear eye sockets blank. The corpse toppled. Scholar darted off, nipping at another, weaving like a dusk bat. The other advanced, weaving past flame with unnatural speed. Its presence chilled air. Fires guttered as it moved. Unsullied phalanx braced. Gray wind leapt, but a backhand slash of frost spear sent him sprawling, blood steaming. Robb cried out, sprinting. Daenerys saw him drop shield, draw Valyrian steel, the other ready to thrust at the direwolf's heart. Then another blade sang, intercepting. Jaime Lannister, white cloak smudged sooty, drove his Valyrian longsword into the spear shaft, parrying. Frost webbed the steel, but did not break it. He twisted, binding the weapon, shouting to Robb. "Strike!" Robb lunged, driving his black and scarlet blade through the other's breast. The creature shrieked, sound like shattering glass. Blue light flared, then winked out as its body crumbled to brittle shards that skittered across ice in tinkling rain. The wights nearest halted, confusion rippling. Some collapsed, puppet strings cut. Others pressed mindlessly. Gray wind rose, wounded yet alive, teeth bared in gratitude or fury, perhaps both. High above, Drogon recovered, wing still numbed but beating. He rallied, breath igniting anew. The dragons swept once more, blasting the valley until white snow turned black with ash. Hours blurred, fire, frost, steel, screams. When night finally drew her veil upon the shivering steppe, the gorge smoldered with charred ruin. Wights lay in silent mounds, some still twitching until dragonglass ended their spasms. The living stood ragged, armor dented, faces blackened with soot stripes like war paint. Robb searched the field by torchlight, calling names: Karstarks, Mormonts, Dothraki Bloodriders, Stormland Knights. Many answered. Many did not. Gray wind limped at his side. Daenerys walked opposite. Skalar perched again, wings drooping. She reached Robb, slid her fingers through his hair streaked with ash, rested her brow to his. No words. A hush settled, heavy as the snow beginning to fall again. Tyrion stood with arrow splinter in his thigh but grin on his lips. We have survived our first horror. The next will surely be worse. Stannis, grim satisfaction on his face, wiped gore from Lightbringer's dull blade. Flames had refused to sheath it. He spoke to Jon. Fire and ice, side by side. Perhaps prophecy merely needed a wolf and dragon in union after all. Jon looked toward the northern dark where faint aurora flickered still. One battle, he said. But, listen. They fell silent. From beyond the blackened valley came faint distant thunder. Footsteps. The dead marched, still. Robb exhaled, breath icing. Then we rest one night and set new lines tomorrow. Daenerys squeezed his hand. We will hold, for as long as the realm needs. In the shadows, Bran's ravens watched, eyes shining. The boy in the tower dreamed of roots mingling with dragonfire, of direwolf hearts beating beneath ice lakes, of dawn condensed into an arrow of living flame. He dreamed of the babe in Daenerys' womb, blood of winter and summer, a song yet unsung. He whispered into the wind that wound through burnt trees and broken spears. Not long now? The heart has quickened. That night, while healers stitched flesh and wolves gnawed marrow from bones of the fallen, Daenerys climbed to a rocky promontory overlooking the wall. Drogon crouched there, massive wings mantled. Rhaegal perched on the ice parapet, tail twitching. Viserion circled, pale form ghostly. She touched Drogon's jaw. "Tomorrow you must fly north again." His rumble vibrated her bones. "I ask more of you than any queen should ask of a child." She whispered, "Yet the dawn depends on your flame." She pressed her forehead to warm scales. Rhaegal hissed gently, as if echoing pledge. Scholar crept down her arm, curling between her palms. He chirped, tiny wings flaring. All three dragons exhaled in unison, breath mingling. Red, green, white, steam swirling like aurora made flesh. Robb found her there. He reached beneath his cloak, drawing a small bundle. "A gift," he said. She untied the knots, revealing a circlet forged that very night. Direwolf fangs wrought in Valyrian steel, cradling a dragon eye ruby at the brow. The metal caught starlight, glinting red-black. "For the queen of both realms," Robb murmured. She laughed softly, tears stinging. "And what crown will you wear, my love?" He lifted her free hand, guiding it to her own belly. "I will wear the smiles of our children, when peace grows." They stood together, crown cradled between them, flames flickering across its dark sheen. In the valley below, embers glowed among snowdrifts like a field of fallen stars. The realm had bled, but it breathed, and as long as it breathed its heart beat for this moment. Far north, unseen, a glacier cracked, a sound like a bell tolling across eternity. The Night's King, ancient gaze turned south, felt a shard of ice splinter from the ancient spell forged at dawn of days. He knew, perhaps for the first time in uncounted centuries, the change of a tide, but in Castle Black. Sansa lit a lamp of blue glass in the window of the king's tower, just as her mother once lit a light for lost children. Seen from far off, the flame twinkled amid darkness. A promise, a call, a beacon. Soldiers paused, hearts easing. Even wargs miles distant lifted their heads, hearing a song older than speech. "Stand." Storm clouds gathered above the wall, bruised and roiling. Yet between their tattered veils shone a single star, bright, defiant, piercing the black. And beneath that star, amid snow that glimmered like sprinkled diamonds, a queen of dragons and a king of wolves stood hand in hand, while the night bent around their fire, and the world dared to hope. Ah. K1. The wall groaned under the weight of a new blizzard, its ancient stones contracting with loud cracks that echoed down the mile-long curtain of ice. Snow whirled so thick that torches guttered to stumps, leaving only the red glow of braziers to cast shifting ruins of light across the courtyard of Castle Black. By lamplight and forge fire, the living raced against darkness. Inside the old shield hall, maesters and hedge healers bent over row upon row of wounded, the air pungent with charred flesh and clove poultice. Sansa Stark moved quietly among the pallets, crocks of willowbark tea balanced on a tray. She paused beside a Stormlander boy no older than 12, his forearms splinted with weirwood slats. Eyes too exhausted for tears stared up at her. She cupped the mug to his lips. He drank without complaint, shivering. Sansa's smile faltered only when she turned away, skirts whispering across straw-dot view. Around her, the hall rang with fevered murmurs. "They burned my brother alive. Dragonglass saved Harl." The queen's little worm flew like lightning. On the west parapet, Robb stood with Jaime Lannister and the Greyjohn, surveying the field below. Morning light had uncovered the full scale of the carnage. A broad wedge of scorched earth where the dead had fallen, brittle limbs jutting from ash like grasping roots. Here and there dragonglass shards still smoldered, hissing when new snowflakes touched them. A scattering of giant bones lay half-buried. Hip bones the size of wagons, ribs arching like bleached ship hulls. Birds would not feed. Even the crows kept to the ramparts, uneasy. "We broke their spearhead, but the horde's still out there," the Greyjohn rumbled, breath pluming. "My scouts count 3 more columns marching from the ice lakes." He jabbed his gauntlet toward the northern ridge, where faint shapes trudged in endless file. If they flank, they'll come right at the shadow tower and split us. Jaime's gloved hand tightened on the parapet. Then we meet them before they merge. Eight. Draw them to the gorge again? Then? Robb shook his head. The gorge is choked with carcasses like a butcher's trench. And they learn. See how they move beyond reach of the palisades. He pointed. Swaths of white, dotted with black footprints, circumvented the valley to the west, already angling toward gentler slopes. We need a hammer, not a trap. Hammer. Jaime arched a brow of tarnished gold. Robb's answer was a grim smile. In the King's Tower solar, Daenerys studied a tarnished bronze mirror. Her cheeks were hollowed from sleepless nights. Silver braids fell undone, matted with soot, but her eyes blazed bright amethyst. She traced the swell beneath her coat, felt the child respond. One slow turn, a promise of life. Scholar lay coiled on the hearthstone, wings spread to catch heat, occasionally puffing a smoke ring that drifted up the chimney. Rhaegal's distant roar rumbled like thunder through the stones. Drogon was away hunting, but she sensed him in her marrow, a furnace banked but never dim. Ser Barristan entered, followed by Missandei wrapped in a patched weeping willow cloak. "Your Grace," the old knight said, "the free folk have arrived." "Already?" Daenerys clasped her cloak. "How many?" "Perhaps 20,000. Tormund Giantsbane leads them. They camp in the forest of whispers beyond the shivering steppe." Missandei added, "They bring mammoths and giant elk, beasts that fear no winter. But they bring wounded too, fever, frostbite, half-starved children." Daenerys nodded. "Then we feed them." She plucked a ledger from the table, grain tallies, salted mutton, barrels of sour goat's milk. Castle Black holds enough to stretch a fortnight. After that, the winter town at Winterfell has stores, Missandei reminded her. "If the roads stay open." Daenerys exhaled. "Bring Tormund to me. We must forge this shield before the hammer falls." She descended to the practice yard as the wildling chief swaggered through the gate, red beard ice-stiff, fox fur cloak snapping. At his heels trudged a rangy bowwoman with copper hair and a face freckled by sun, not snow. Jon approached from the opposite side. When he saw the girl, a bone-deep ache flashed in his eyes. "Ygritte," he whispered. She smiled, brittle. "Thought you'd be grander after all them crowns, Crow." Their reunion waited as Tormund swept a bow. "Queen o' Flames and King Wolf, I've marched my folk across frozen hell, because your crows said there'd be fires tall as mountains and bellies full by nightfall." He clapped a scarred hand to his chest. "Give me truth." Daenerys met his blunt stare. "Truth. We have warmth, but not enough. Food, but less than we need. Yet I offer more. A place at our side when dawn rises. Fight with us, and the gift lands south of the wall will be yours to till and hunt. No more kneeling. Only standing." "Then?" Tormund's bushy brows rose. "Free folk in Kneelerfields." He spat into the snow. "Better than ice tombs, I reckon." He appraised her silent dragons overhead, then Robb striding from the ramparts, wolf helm under arm. "We'll take your stand." His voice softened. "But my people fear your dead men's traps. Show them fire that burns the cold, and they'll follow anywhere." Drogon's answering screech split the sky as if on cue, sweeping low in a gust that toppled archery targets and whipped cloaks sideways. Flames licked his jaws, scorching the dead hulk of a giant strung to a guillotine post. The body burst, fell to cinders. Wildlings cheered, fear washed clean by wonder. Tormund bared teeth. "Thou'll do." While new allies trickled inside the walls, Tywin Lannister oversaw the forging yard. Snow hissed on red-hot irons, steam coiling around builders who hefted beetle hammers bigger than their heads. Every third anvil beat a different rhythm. One for spear sockets, one for mounts on scythe carts, one stamping a direwolf dragon's sigil onto kettle helms. When a smith's elbow sagged, Tywin's cane rapped the post, and fresh coal was thrown in. Maester Luwin joined him, Parchment rolled. The Raven from Old Town confirms the shipment. 2 barges of obsidian, enough for 30,000 arrowheads. Tywin's lips thinned. If they arrive before the river freezes solid. 8 White Harbor now, Leuven said, hopeful. Lord Manderley has pledged his last ships to make the run. Tywin hissed through his nose. We gamble our existence on fat men's fleets. Yet he squared razor-straight shoulders. Tell your queen her traps will be ready. 2 days passed in relentless toil. Dawn of the 3rd brought crimson streaks through thinning clouds. Bran, half dreaming beneath sable furs in a rookery loft, felt the weirnet hum like harp strings in a rising gale. He slipped into Wargside, riding the wind across drifts until he perched within the eyes of a gaunt, snowy owl. Northward he soared, skimming over glacial crevices to a valley of nightglass rock. A heartbeat later he saw them, the next wave. White stretched to the horizon, a river of bone dust. At their center strode the Night's King, not on elk nor horse, but upon a throne of ice riding the backs of 6 undead giants yoked by chains of pale iron. In the Night's King's hand flickered a blade of living moonlight, and above him beating wings thundered. An ice dragon, vaster than Viserion, with a crown of icicles rising like spears. Its eyes glowed star-bright blue. Where its frozen breath touched the clouds, snowflakes crystallized so heavy they fell as shards. Bran's owl heart seized. He broke the bond, jerking awake. Quills scattered. He cried for Hodor, though Hodor was leagues south in Winterfell, and remembered too late. Alone, he dragged himself to the ladder, slid down, half crawling, half warging small mice to ferry warnings. Jon found him collapsed at the library arch. Bran clutched his wrist. Iced dragon, he gasped. An army behind the first, 2 days. Jon hauled him up. Tell the council. I'll ready the ravens. He sprinted. Robb's war council convened under torch rings in an ice-slick storeroom. Snow melted on helmets, pooling around boots. Bran's intel hung like frost between breaths, and for a moment silence reigned. Tyrion broke it. An ice dragon, taller than Winterfell's keep. My sister would have wet herself. He limped once, leaning heavy on the table. Do we have plan? Stannis spoke first. If we shatter the giants bearing that throne, perhaps the Night's King slows. Tormund barked a laugh. You ever try felling a giant when it don't feel pain, and you're hip deep in White Walkers? Tywin's eyes narrowed. Better to decapitate command. Cut the serpent's head and the body founders. Robb looked to Daenerys. She met his gaze, jaw set. Dragons kill dragons. Drogon and Rhaegal will engage the beast. Viserion covers ground troops. Tyrion coughed. Drogon's wing is still healing and Rhaegal is smaller. This thing will kill us all if we hesitate. She snapped. Robb laid his palm over hers. We braced the shivering step again. But this time the trench line must be deeper, the pitch hotter. Tywin, double the Scorpion cruise, load harpoons with dragon glass-tipped chains. If Drogon snares the ice dragon's wings, ground men can anchor it. Tywin inclined his head. I'll need the Queen's sorceress glass on every forge within 8 hours. Take it, Daenerys said. Jon added, and a small spearhead to slip behind. If Bran can guide us to the Weirwood Heart. The room turned to Bran, bundled in fur, cheek chalk white data. He steadied, voice soft. A grove of dead weirwood lies east of the frozen ford. I feel its roots still. They pierce the magic that binds the Night's King. If someone reaches it with dragonglass, and blood of the line of first men. Robb stared. Blood of first men ran in Starks. His eyes flicked to Arya, standing silent at room's edge, then to Sansa tending scrolls. He breathed out. I'll go. No, Arya said. You lead the host. I'll take the spear. I can move unseen. Robb moved to protest, but she raised needle between 2 fingers. I've walked the dark. Let me. Jon stepped forward. I'm half Stark, half Targaryen now, if rumor suits. I'll go with her. Daenerys' gaze flickered. Pain, pride, fear. Then take Skalar, she said. He is small, but his flame is pure. Plans set. The council scattered like sparks. Outside, axes rang again, night swallowed by industry. The eve of battle tasted metallic, like winter's last breath before steel. Robb lay awake in a barrack loft. Gray wind pressed flank to flank, tuning his whines to the wind. At the foot of the straw mattress, Daenerys sat cross-legged, hair unbraided, letting moonlight trace the curve of her belly. Between them no words were left, only warmth of clasped fingers. Eventually she sang in Valyrian, low lullaby of dragons born in smoke and shadow. Robb closed his eyes. Memory carried him to soft Crannog Lake summers. Caitlin humming in river-run gardens. Song and heartbeats became the same. When dawn came, gray and sharp, horns wailed thrice. Men stumbled from blankets, pots spilled. Ravens burst skyward. The valley north of the shivering steppe lay glass still. But every man felt tremor rolling beneath snow. Robb mounted vengeance. His war drear. Steel barding etched with direwolf dragon crest. Daenerys climbed Drogon's saddle. Rhaegal circling. Viserion landed on the ridge behind, low growl in his chest. Soldiers knew not whether to cheer or pray. Arya wrapped herself in white wool and slipped from sight, Jon and Scalar ghosting her steps. They crossed the ice bridge into forest gloom before midday shadows found them. By high sun, an unnatural twilight overtook the sky, aurora blazing midday blue. Then the night's king arrived. First came a hush. Wind ceased. Flames flickered low. Then, like thunder through cloth, the ice dragon's wings tore the clouds. It was vaster than Bran's vision, its chest a cathedral of frozen ribs, its hide comet blue streaked with silver veins. Snowstorms spiraled in its slipstream. Glaciers cracked where it passed. Below marched the dead, giants bound to the throne, legions of whites, pale knights in mirror-bright mail, white spiders dragging silk nets spun of frost. At their center shimmered the night's king, flesh the purest crystal, hair like filaments of ice. He lifted one translucent hand. Silence shattered into roar. Whites charged. Robb's front ranks bent, elbows locking shields to shield. "Hold!" he shouted, voice like a bell. The first wave crashed. Dragon glass spears punched. Bodies burst. The shield wall reeled but held. Drogon stooped from the noonlight gloom, flame blooming crimson across the ice dragon's left wing. Steam exploded. Scales cracked like lake ice in thaw. The ice dragon shrieked, a screech of glaciers grinding. It wheeled, exhaled a torrent of sapphire breath. The blast hammered Drogon mid-flight, sheathing him in rhyme. He tumbled, wings stiffening. Daenerys spurred him with voice alone. "Dracarys, my son." Heat roared from deep within. Red fissures spidered through frost. Ice sloughed off in molten shards. Drogon flapped skyward anew. Rhaegal darted under the ice dragon's vast belly, gouging with torch-bright fire. But the creature's hide refused to melt. Instead, frost jetted from vents along its spine, quenching flame, leaving Rhaegal limping from sudden freeze. On the ridge, Tywin's scorpions thrummed. Chains of black iron and dragonglass bolts sang high. Two buried into the ice dragon's right shoulder. The third snagged a wing joint. Builders hauled on windlasses, tautening chain. The beast bucked, shrieked, but slowed. Robb signaled. Trebuchets lofted tar casks laced with wildfire captured from Stannis. They burst on the ice dragon's back, green fire licking across blue skin. Where wild and dragon fire intertwined, cracks formed, scales exploded outward in glittering halos. Below, Stannis led Stormlanders in a wedge to pierce the undead giants. Valyrian axe in hand, Jeor Mormont felled one giant's knee. Tormund vaulted the corpse, planting a dragonglass pick behind the ear of another. The giant convulsed, ripping the Night's King's palanquin chain. Ice throne tilted. The king rose, calm, his gaze fixed on Robb. 2 pinpricks of starlight. He raised his moonblade, and hoarfrost swept the field. Unsullied shields iced over, cracked. Spears stuck mid-thrust. Men staggered. Daenerys saw Robb waver. She roared Drogon earthward, flames seething to carve a barrier. The Night's King stepped through fire untouched, frost foaming up to extinguish it. Then, above the chaos, a piercing cry. Small, fierce. Scholar dived from a torn cloud, wings shimmering silver. The hatchling spat a jet of white-hot flame, so pure it glowed gold at the core. It seared the moonblade's edge, sending veins of golden heat rippling across the Night's King's arm. Crystal flesh clouded, fissures spidering. High in the pines east of the field, Arya watched through frost-blurred lashes. Jon knelt beside a massive dead heart tree, its face long since hacked away by axes of winter. Bran's raven circled overhead. Jon unsheathed a dragonglass dagger, sliced his palm, let blood drip onto roots, exposed like veins. The wood drank, dark veins pulsing crimson. Arya dashed forward, needle in one hand, a shard of dragonglass bound to an ash haft in the other. She plunged the shard into the root, whispering the words Bran taught her. From winter death, summer breath. Blood, sap, glass. Snow met. The forest shuddered. A tremor raced through buried roots, under the battlefield, up through cracked ice. The Night's King staggered. He looked to the ground, eyes widening in the first hint of emotion. Fear. Frost flared from his wounds, trying to mend. Bran, miles away, strained every fiber of soul. He reached through centuries, through stone, through bark. He fused Robb's heartbeat, Daenerys' flame, Jon's blood. Arya's whisper. The weirwood network lit as if struck by lightning. Robb saw the Night's King falter. He charged, Valyrian steel raised. Grey wind bounded beside, wounded but incandescent with rage. Drogon swept low, lighting Robb's sword edge with scarlet fire. Robb leapt, moments suspended, blade carving a crescent of living flame that met the moonblade midway. Steel of fire kissed ice of moon. A shriek rent sky and stone. The Night's King's weapon shattered to powder. Robb drove his blade through crystal breastplate. Frost exploded in blue diamonds. The Night's King convulsed. Cracks fissured his crown. His lips parted in a gasp, soundless and old as nightfall. Light poured out. An aurora in reverse, sucked upward into nothing. Across the field, thousands of wights collapsed, strings cut. Giants slumped. Spiders froze mid-crawl and crumbled. The ice dragon screamed, wings thrashing. Tywin's chain snapped. Scorpions ripped from mountings. Rhaegal seized an opening, torrent of fire roiling into the rent already carved. Drogon joined, flame converging in a crucible of red and green. Scales melted, membrane tore, ribs glowed. With a detonation that knocked men flat, the ice dragon burst, steam geysering, shards of sapphire scattering across the snowscape like fallen stars. Silence followed. Hushed, ringing, vulnerable. Steam drifted over the valley. Snowflakes drifted, gentle now, glinting in shafts of weak sun breaking. Robb stood swaying, sword buried in a pile of vaporizing frost. Grey wind pressed to his side. Daenerys landed. She slipped from Drogon's neck, ran, and caught her husband before his knees failed. He sagged against her, breath ragged, but alive. Together they looked upon the quiet field where a war ending echoed through bones. All around, the living rose, stunned. Tears came unbidden, laughter and sobs mingling like spring water under ice. Tormund whooped, swinging a broken spear until wildlings joined his roar. Stannis sank to one knee, letting Lightbringer fall dull to snow. Tyrion wept openly, leaning on his cane, shaking with relief. Tywin exhaled once. Slow, a frost cloud leaving a lion's stern mouth. Even he bowed his head. Above, Drogon and Rhaegal wheeled triumphant. Steam cloud silhouettes framed them like heraldry of dawn. Skalar fluttered back to Daenerys' shoulder, chest heaving, smoke curling from nostrils. She stroked the hatchling's neck, whispering Valyrian thanks. Bran's consciousness drifted out of ravens, sinking back to frail flesh. In the stillness of the rookery he smiled, tears freezing on his lashes. "The song," he murmured, "has new verses now." 3 days later, under skies clearing to pale sapphire, a council gathered at the base of the wall, in a clearing newly sanctified with melted snow and buried whites. There, the living laid stones over fallen comrades, marking graves as far as eye could wander. No pyres, the earth at last could rest. Daenerys stepped onto a low dais lined with black banners, now embroidered with a gold sunrise behind direwolf and dragon. Her voice carried in calm winter air. "We have driven back the darkness this day, yet remember, winter's chill will come again. Walls may stand, dragons may fly, but only hearts joined can hold the night forever at bay." Robb took her hand, lifted it. "No king, no queen, no guardians. From this hour, we vow a realm without chains of crown and birth. Let every house, great or humble, send a voice to a council at spring's first thaw. Together, we will fashion laws to bind not by fear, but by choice." Then, cheers lifted. Wildlings and Northmen, Stormlanders and Reach Knights, men of Essos far from home, unsullied whose shields shone with new crests, Dothraki jingling bells, frozen stiff, but ringing all the same. Even Tywin's stern visage cracked as he looked upon crowds mingled without terror. Jon stood beside Bran in a wicker chair lined with fox fur. He felt Callus's ache, old wounds smart, yet his heart soared as Ygritte threaded her fingers through his. Samwell scribbled in a heavy ledger. The first charter of Dawn's watch, signatures inked with blood and ash. Rhaegal glided overhead, shadow mingling with pale sunlight. Viserion carried war-orphaned children aloft in slow circles, their shrieks of delight rolling down. Drogon perched upon the shattered remains of the shivering steppe palisade, chest rumbling deep content. Night fell not with dread but with hearth smoke and song. In the rebuilt shield hall, Tyrion produced casks of Dornish red, somehow through snows. "Figured we'd live long enough to taste it," he quipped, filling wooden cups. Jaime clinked his own, solemn gaze upon his once golden hand, now scarred and strong. Sansa sang an old lullaby of the neck, her voice pure as ice melt. Arya danced through shadows, blades sheathing and flashing like winter lightning. When torches guttered low, Daenerys and Robb walked the ramparts, arms around each other. Stars glittered, brighter than either had seen since childhood. Below them, trenches of wildfire still smoked, but new snow already softened edges. "Is it finished?" Robb asked. "For now." She brushed knuckles along his jaw. "The realm awaits spring." Her hand guided his to her belly. A faint kick answered. Robb's breath caught. Tears burned unshed. "What will we call him?" he whispered. "Or her," she teased. "I thought maybe Iliara." Old Valyrian, light between storms. He smiled through damp lashes. "Iliari Stark, first of that name. Stark Targaryen." She corrected, eyes dancing. He kissed her brow, then her mouth, tasting salt tears and the promise of sugar plums he'd once stolen from Winterfell kitchens. Wind ruffled their cloaks, carried warmth from distant dragonfire, carried the susurrus of direwolves lulled in dreams free of terror, carried the unborn future on wings beating gentle as skylarks. Far away, in Old Town's tallest spire, an archmaester penned a new book. The Pact of Frost and Flame. Across narrow sea, merchants whispered of a land where dragons and direwolves guarded roads safe for trade. In Dorne, little Princess Arianne traced new maps, smiling at sunlit margins. And on a lonely island of IB, fishermen watched a green-black comet streak across heavens, an omen they would not understand. But within the heart of winter, at that fragile hour where night and dawn clasp hands, two figures, one born of wolf-pack snow, the other of dragonfire storm, stood as equals on an old wall no longer dividing. Their breaths mingled, rose, and vanished into stars. And somewhere deep beneath still earth, weirwood roots and dragon bones twined, thrumming a lullaby older than the Seven, older than R'hllor, older than even the first men. Light has come, night undone. Song of blood and flame begun. Ah, kai. Pan. A hush hung over the wall in the small hours, that dreaming interval when even victory seems fragile. The torches along the ramparts burned low, their embers whispering, as if wary of waking the night. In the silent yard below, men slept where exhaustion took them. Propped against barrels, sprawled in pickets of broken spears, curled beneath torn war cloaks still smelling of pitch and blood. The snow drifted down softly, covering each of them in the same white shroud, erasing sigils until every armor plate bore only winter's brand. Above, the stars blazed unfamiliar, arranged in constellations no maester had charted since the breaking. As though the sky itself were revising its story, Robb Stark stood alone on King's Tower roof, cloak tugging at his shoulders. He had left Daenerys drowsing beside the hearth, Rhaegal's warmth washing the chamber, the brown-eyed babe inside her belly rolling beneath her skin like a tide under moonlight. He kissed her brow, whispered that he would breathe winter's air one moment longer. Now, he stared north at the ashen scars sprawled across the valley and tried to believe peace might take root there. Gray wind emerged from the stairwell's shadow and pressed his great head beneath Robb's palm, a wordless communion that steadied the king's pulse. Together, they watched the horizon where aurora remnants flickered azure and violet, like the last slow blink of the dead. Far below, Jon Snow paced the bridge leading from the east barracks to the gatehouse. Ghost paced too, their footfalls synchronizing. Jon's thoughts wandered to the kiss Ygritte had given him when the fires died, fierce and full of tears neither would name. They had stood in that ring of embers where the ice dragon shards still steamed and chosen silence, because words could break what battle had repaired. She'd gone with Tormund to calm the free folk children, and Jon to check patrols, each trusting the other would return. He touched the pommel of Longclaw, absently, feeling the nicks from Moonblade and Frostwalker shields. Even a blade of Valyrian steel remembered danger. In the silent west yard, Arya Stark perched on the lip of the well, legs swinging. Needle lay across her lap. Dragonglass still coated the fuller like black sugar. Every so often she lifted it to catch starlight. She thought of Syrio Forel and the halls of Bravos, of the faces she had worn and the ones she had cast aside, then of Bran's owl eyes guiding her through pines. Somewhere beyond the wall roots burrowed, sap twisted, and something vast but gentle hummed, as if thanking her for the blood she'd offered in that dead grove. She shivered. Then she felt a presence, and looked up to find Jaime Lannister watching from the gateway, cloak clasped at his throat. He inclined his head, earnest, no mockery, before turning away. Arya blinked, unsure if she'd just received courtesy or apology, then returned to counting heartbeats in the snow. In the forge cavern, Tywin Lannister leaned on his cane while sparks danced over his shoulders like tiny fireflies. The builders had refused rest. Momentum kept their hammers ringing. If the Night's King had taught them anything, it was that tools forged in peace required as much zeal as those for war. Tywin inspected each mold, tapping slag out of channels, tightening rivets. For a lion of Casterly rock to serve the Night's Watch as a master builder seemed absurd to many. But absurdity had become the marrow of survival. Every now and again a black brother saluted him, warily, but respectfully, and Tywin would nod, pretending the pain in his joints was only cold. Bran lay in the rookery again, though he was no longer alone. Samwell Tarly had dragged 2 mattresses and 3 fur throws up the spiral, swearing at every step, until he and Gilly could settle Bran and the babe safely away from coughs of wounded below. Bran listened as ravens roosted in the rafters, their wings rustling like leaves on distant trees. Every bird's heart fluttered against his own. He felt the weir net tremble, no longer in alarm, but adjustment, roots shifting into new patterns, the way a harpist retunes strings after a triumphal song. Bran's breathing slowed to match the earth's long rhythm. His dreams that night would be deep and wide, full of languages still unnamed. Morning seeped pearl gray into the world. Hearth smoke drifted straight up, unhurried. Crackers of ice broke loose from the wall's face and crashed below, but no urgency followed. Light spilled through clouds, watery and forgiving, washing color back into banners. Carts creaked as teams of oxen hauled away broken palisades and bodies swathed in linen. Over the main gate, a new flag unfurled. Wolf and dragon, rampant on gold sunrise. And the watchers murmured approval, or curiosity, or both. Daenerys emerged wrapped in a cobalt cloak trimmed with bearskin, her hair unbound and wild in the cold. She carried Scalar on her forearm, the hatchling's wings nearly the span of her shoulders now. The little dragon hissed at every gust, eager to test air currents. Robb descended to meet her, leaving Grey Wind staring after like a jealous sentinel. "You should be abed," he chided gently, "and miss the dawn we paid so dearly for." She returned, "I'll sleep when I'm ancient as Maester Luwin." He smiled, brushing wind-blown strands from her eyes. Together they climbed the observation scaffold Tywin had built, though the view had changed. What had been a palisade of warfare now teemed with tents of contrasting color. Brown hide yurts of the free folk, black watch barracks patched beside lavender-dorned silks, green Tyrell awnings pitched by couriers who'd raced north with grain wagons. Sails far below the gift glimmered like cut gems, Lord Manderly's swollen cogs pushing upriver with last convoys before freeze. Robb surveyed it all. "They said Winterfell was the heartbeat of the North," he murmured. "But now the North stretches wherever these people gather." Daenerys drew a breath white as milk. "They gather because they believe." She touched her belly. "Keep them believing." Late morning found the makeshift Great Hall. An old warehouse cleared of chains and crates, buzzing with delegates. Manderly sat beside Davos Seaworth, discussing toll exemptions for harbor pilots. Brienne conferred with Bronn about escort routes for refugee trains. Arianne Martell's envoy braided garlands with weirwood blossoms newly thawed by dragonfire, while one of the sand snakes sparred good-naturedly with Podrick Payne near the doors. The smell of stewed goat filled rafters, cut by the sharper scent of Korth incense, burning in half-cracked braziers. At the center, Tyrion addressed a circle of scribes. "We require 3 pillars for a council that lasts: equal vote, rotating steward, and open ledger." He waved his quill like a baton. "Transparency, dear friends, lest the next century read us as footnotes between tyrants." "No." Stannis stood behind the dwarf. Until Tyrion finished. Then he said, "Justice also." His mouth twitched. "Next time darkness rises, the realm must trust its guardians." Eyes shifted to Tywin. He met them without blinking. "Write it so," he said. No council in Westeros history had ever convened without at least one dagger drawn under the table. Yet here daggers lay openly on the tabletop, surrendered, not hidden. The gesture did more for trust than any parchment ever could. After supper, Robb gathered a dozen commanders for a ride along the Old King's Road. Hearts needing movement. Arya insisted on accompanying. Sansa too, though she rode side saddle on a sure-footed Garen. Jon led on foot with Ghost, scanning snowfields where charred hulks of bone still jutted. Conversation meandered from planting schedules to which ruined castles might become sanctuaries. When they rested at dusk, the sky flared copper behind them. Arya scaled a boulder and pointed west. "Do you hear that?" she said, faint at first, then stronger, the crash of heavy surf. "That sea's 200 leagues off," said Robb. Arya shook her head. "Not water. Wings." They turned as a shape materialized beyond the tree line. Viserion, larger now for weeks of gorging on elk, soared with something clutched in his talons. A trunk of cedar lashed with rope. He dropped it at their feet, scattering snow. The lid sprang and out rolled dozens of white ellipsoids faintly glowing. Dragon eggs turned to stone by cold, stolen ages ago from Valyria's last traders, now cracked open by fire and blood. Some were shriveled husks, but 5 pulsed with warmth. Sansa touched the smooth shell of the nearest. "More." Robb's throat tightened. "More." They hurried back beneath star-splashed sky, each step throbbing with possibility and terror. Daenerys met them in the yard, hands stained with parchment ink. When she saw the eggs, she pressed both palms over her mouth. Tears slipped between fingers before she could speak. Bran, roused from half-sleep, sensed ripples in the rootwork. The trees responded with cautious thrill. Dragons might once again cradle the world in flame, flame that could nurture as much as destroy. The choice faced them naked. Shape or shatter. Word spread with dawn. By midday, a semicircle of midwives and pyromancers ringed a small courtyard where the eggs nestled in raked charcoal. Maester Luwin muttered about flux ratios. Sorcerers from Ashai, who had drifted north through chaos like black moths to a lantern, offered low, throaty hymns no one understood. Daenerys knelt alone before the pit, eyes closed, flame dancing over her skin without scorching. She whispered names for each egg. Ysera, Branthos, Morgul, Solace, and Fennes. Then she rose and walked away, leaving the charcoal to glow. Winter marched on. Frost returned each night, but soft, like a tired adversary. Blacksmiths fashioned plowshares in equal number to sword hilts. Children from Dorne chased direwolf pups across melted spots, shrieking when the pups whirled and bowled them over. Unsullied learned to knit from northern grandmothers, fingers stiff but patient. In the distant south, whispers of the Dawn Council reached Highgarden and Storm's End. Some lords fretted, others packed wagons with seed across collapsed bridges. Life edged back into the corners. Daenerys spent her mornings with Tywin reviewing stonework for watchtowers. She studied his sketches, marveled how a mind that once conjured siege machines now dreamed of granaries too deep for frost. Tywin spoke rarely of his children. Once she caught him gazing toward the horizon where Drogon soared, pale winter sun gilding his jaw. When she asked what he saw, he replied, "Estates I built, gone. But foundations remain." She understood. Robb traveled with Jon to Queenscrown, where free folk began felling dead trees for timber. Jon's own heritage, bastard of Winterfell, heir to secret blood, had become rumor more than burden. He wore the stigma lightly. When a wildling boy bowed to him as Prince of Snow, Jon ruffled the lad's hair and said princes were just men who stood where others would not. The boy straightened 2 inches taller. Up and down the King's Road, merchants posted new signs. 2-headed wolf dragon, meaning safe lodging. Ints burned candles in windows. Travelers left seed sacks or beads in place of coin, trusting scribbled tallies to settle debts once minted currency returned. The economy of disaster, forged by necessity, hummed with goodwill. There were cheats. There always were. But they grew fewer as stories flourished of thieves set upon by direwolves or stared down by gleaming dragon eyes at dusk. 4 weeks after the defeat of the Night's King, the eggs began to quiver. Samwell was first to hear it, faint knocking beneath shell, like a once-forgotten heartbeat surfacing through cotton. He fetched Bran, who pressed fingertips against Ysera's dappled green surface and felt mind scoils unspooling inside. Daenerys came running, robes flaring. She dismissed everyone but Bran, Sam, and Missandei, who knelt behind like a cousin to both scribe and sister. They burned cedar chips and myrrh. They sang the lullaby Daenerys' mother had sung in the sailcloth cradle, beyond storm-swept Dragonstone. As starlight poured through the courtyard's open roof, each egg cracked with a sound like ice shearing from cliffs. Steam billowed. Out tumbled hatchlings slick and weak-limbed, silver eyes blind to all but heat. Daenerys cupped them against her breast one by one, tears wet on her neck. Bran guided her hands, whispering when flame threatened to scorch flesh. None of it burned her. The new dragon smelled of ashes and newborn lamb. In the days that followed, castle corridors rang with high-pitched squeals and flaps. Old Nan, restored by Maester's tonics and stubborn will, scolded grooms for scattering sawdust near nurseries. Sansa organized seamstresses to stitch leather gauntlets for dragon keepers. Free folk taught the keepers songs to mimic alpine thermals, coaxing flight. Each solution bred another problem. Each problem forged another bond. But not all bonds healed so swiftly. News arrived from the Reach. Sir Hobber Redwine had raised banners against the usurping Council of Snow and Fire, styling himself defender of tradition. He held 3 castles and refused grain tithes. Tyrell riders loyal to Margaery, newly freed from the shame cells, marched to quell him, but skirmishes flared. Robb drafted missives heavy with pleas and warnings. Tyrion advised bribery. Stannis favored swift retribution. Daenerys listened, then dispatched to Barristan with a single dragon pass overhead. No flame, only roar. Redwyne surrendered at dusk. Grain wagons rolled 2 days later. None mentioned that a pair of direwolves had been spotted shadowing the caravan. Worse tidings came from the Iron Islands. Yara Greyjoy, newly returned from distant voyages, petitioned Riverrun for recognition as Lady of the Seas in exchange for escorting refugees along the western coasts. Most hailed the offer, but a splinter faction under Victarion's bastard raised black sails yet again, sacking cracked towns along the Fingers. Arya requested leave to hunt them. Robb denied her twice. The third time she left anyway, slipping into night with Gendry's newly hammered longboat and 3 silent sisters from the Faceless Guild. Weeks later, refugees reported a reaver ship aflame near Pike, and a wolf banner lashed to its shattered mast. Arya came home gloveless, eyes older, and refused to speak of it. Spring teased the land, sun lingering minutes longer, wind smelling faintly of wet loam. Jon oversaw construction of watch beacons along the eastern frost rivers, where others might rise again. Bran's dreams suggested small pockets of restless dead, still wandered, cut from the Weirnet's song, aimless but lethal. Patrols with dragon-glass lances rode the rim of the haunted forest, guided by ravens who spoke Bran's warnings in uncanny croaks. Each kill was burned by wildling fires, then buried under cairns shaped like the new dawn sigil. Half sun, half flame. On the last eve before the Great Council's scheduled departure for Winterfell, a rare quiet fell. Torches were doused early. Daenerys sat alone in the hot springs cavern beneath the wall, steam curling around her shoulders. The stone floor was rough but soothing. Water lapped at her calves. Scalar perched nearby, preening. The 4 newer hatchlings clung to stalagmite ridges, lids heavy with heat-drowsed dreams. In the pool's reflection, she studied her face, sunken cheeks filling slowly, smile lines cracking the stern mask she'd worn since Meereen. She thought of Viserys, of Drogo, of Jorah's unwavering gaze now fixed on horizons unknown as he scouted trade routes through the Gift. She wondered if they would recognize the woman she had become. Footsteps echoed. Robb entered, quiet as snow. He shed cloak and boots, waded in. Warm water embraced them, ripples colliding between knees. She folded into his arms. For a long while they said nothing. Then he whispered fears of the council, of lords who would never trust dragons, of small folk suspicious that wolves might rule with hidden teeth. She countered with worries for the child. What realm would cradle a babe whose veins coursed with conflagration and northern winter both? Their insecurities tangled like roots until Robb kissed her wrist. "Our child will write their own realm," he said. "We just grant them the quill." The next morning, ravens beat upward in spirals as column after column set south for Winterfell. Direwolves bounded ahead, dragons above, and the roads thrummed with unprecedented traffic. Dothraki scouts clearing way for Dornish wagons, Night's Watch rangers laughing with Manderly seamen, sand snakes juggling citrus for pale-skinned northern orphans. It took half a day for the last ox carts to rumble out the gate. Bran watched them go from his tower, heart pinched with longing but anchored by duty north. Sam remained behind to catalog the Citadel tomes newly arrived. Ghost lingered until Jon signaled, then the white direwolf trotted after, tail high. As they vanished into the tree line, Bran felt a tug in the earth, roots stretching southward, connecting paths like nerves. On the King's Road, Robb and Daenerys rode at the vanguard. Frost cracked under hooves, but sun patches shone ahead. Children marched between flanks, singing a new tune written by Rhaenys Tyrell, verse of a wolf and dragon who kissed at dawn, chorus echoing across fields. At dusk, they made camp in a meadow dotted with frozen buttercups. Fires bloomed. Banners hung limp. Arya returned from scouting with 3 rabbits. Sansa produced saffron pilfered from Old Town caravans. Davos offered salt. Together they brewed stew. Tyrion discovered an untouched cask of Arbor gold and insisted on toasts. Even Tywin, seated by secondary flame, accepted a cup, eyes reflecting amber flicker. Jaime clinked his brother's rim, murmuring a vow to one day rebuild the septs they'd destroyed. Daenerys retired early, the babe restless. She dreamt of red snow. In her dream, she stood in a courtyard of melting ice, holding the newborn wrapped in direwolf fur. Rhaegal circled overhead. Scalar perched on her shoulder. Drogon's shadow warmed the stones. Across from her, Bran emerged from a tree trunk, face serene. He lifted a branch carved like a scepter. The cycle bends, he told her, but roots remember. Then the dream dissolved into cascading petals. When she awoke, contractions rippled. She whispered Robb's name. He was instantly alert, face softening, worry flickering. Midwives were summoned. The dragons felt it, each lifted head, thrummed low chords. Scalar fluttered outside the tent, refusing to leave the entrance. Snowflakes drifted, but none settled. They melted in the heat radiating from the canvas. Labor stretched until silver light seeped beyond horizon. Robb knelt behind the partition, gripping Daenerys' hand so tight his knuckles blanched. She crushed back, just as fiercely. Outside, wolves paced. Dragons crooned. Horses stamped. Soldiers held breaths. The first cry shattered stillness. A wail robust, not frail. The midwife emerged, cheeks streaked with sweat. "A girl," she gasped, strong as storm. She beckoned Robb. He stumbled inside. Daenerys lay drained but luminous, hair damp, eyes glistening. The babe rested against her breast, tiny fists curled. A wisp of silver hair crowned her head, but her eyes, when they cracked open, were gray as a direwolf's pelt. She stared at Robb without blinking, as if recognizing him from stories whispered in the womb. "Iliara," Daenerys croaked. Robb whispered the name. He bent, touched the infant's brow. Warmth pulsed. Neither fever nor simple life warmth, but something deeper, a balancing ember where ice might gather. He wept then, silent and unashamed. Outside the tent, torches flared of their own accord. Wolves halted and raised muzzles, in a chorus that rolled across camp. Drogon tilted his massive head and uttered a rumble bordering on purr. Rhaegal and Viserion responded with melodic chirrups. Snowflakes drifting across the encampment ignited in pinpoints of red light, winking out before they landed, leaving air fragrant with cedar. Dawn's first golden edge crested above pines. Trumpets did not sound. Horns did not blare. Instead, the hush returned. The whole host stood as though carved from frost, listening to the newborn's cries weaving with wolf howls and dragon croons. A symphony of beginnings. Later that day, Robb carried Eliar to Bran's tent. Bran touched her cheek and closed his eyes. For a moment the entire woods hushed, as if the weirnet listened too. When he opened them, tears pooled. "She is," he faltered, searching for word beyond mortal measure. "Hope," he whispered. "Hope wearing skin." Sansa cradled her next, humming the neck lullaby. Arya traced the baby's fingernails, marveling at their translucent crescents. Jon kissed Eliara's brow, promising a world worthy of such gaze. Tormund thundered, "A wee dragon wolf. Hide the goats," to laughter from every corner. Tywin looked longest. At last he bowed. Low, knightly, then strode away, cane tapping fast. The journey resumed in slower cadence, as though all steps measured themselves against the infant's heartbeat. Couriers galloped ahead to Winterfell, where garrison builders raced to clear rubble and hang fresh banners. The Godswood's heart tree stretched new red leaves despite winter. Ravens nested in its boughs, croaking scraps of lullabies. 3 leagues from Moat Cailin, Bran's ravens delivered tidings. Lord Harren's ghost tower had collapsed in thaw, revealing hidden libraries. Scholars begged the Dawn Council for artisans to preserve them. Tyrion nearly fell off his pony in glee. Knowledge, like flame, demanded tending. Crossing the neck, the column met Howland Reed, small in stature but bright-eyed. He knelt before Daenerys, then blessed Eliar in the name of the Green Men. He pressed a bundle into Robb's hands, a necklace of interwoven reed and dragonglass seeds that shimmered green and black. "For her, and for the world shall mend," he said, then vanished into marsh mist before thanks could form. That night, Arya dreamed of Nymeria leading a pack through snowless woods, thick with blooming crocus. Jaime dreamed of a keep ringed by gardens and no lions on its gates. Tywin, sleepless, sat alone on a hillock, watching constellations remap out. He traced scars on his knuckles, then crushed frost beneath boot, until dawn bled vermilion. At last, Winterfell's broken towers rose on the horizon. Smoke curled from repaired chimneys, banners snapped. Direwolf bright gray tilting into gold sunrise. The drawbridge lowered as Rikar Karstark, steward in Robb's long absence, welcomed them with tears freezing on his beard. Robb dismounted first, lifting Illyar high. The crowd fell silent. A collective inhale. Then cheers erupted, so loud the rookery ravens took flight, and wolves barked joy. Inside the castle walls, repair crews paused. Children peered from windows. The new dragons, tethered to saddles, shook snow from wings and craned necks, sniffing ancient stone. Draughts of warmth coursed along battlement cracks. Blacksmiths claimed the metal of their forges glowed brighter just being near Dragonskin. Robb carried Illyar into the Godswood. Daenerys followed, cloak sweeping needled ground. Bran waited by the heart tree, wheelchair parked beside a stone bench. He held a walnut bowl brimming with warm spring water drawn from the hot springs below, a tributary feeding the tree's roots. Jon unstoppered a vial of Night's Watch ink. Arya produced a scalpel. Sansa read a scripture adapted from both Old God's Oaths and New Dawn Charter. They would not baptize Illyar into one faith. They would anoint her with all. Robb pricked his thumb. Daenerys pricked hers. Their mingled blood fell into the bowl. Bran added a drop of spring water, the mixture swirling jade. He touched the child's forehead. The mark shimmered, then vanished. The weirwood's face seemed to soften. Sap tears slowed. Leaves rustled though no wind moved. A hush bound the grove until a raven cawed overhead. Acknowledgement rather than dirge. As they left, small folk thronged. Some prostrated, others reached to brush cloaks. Daenerys passed Illyar to a Dornish midwife who had lost her own daughter at the Trident. Tears streamed as warmth seeped into long chilled palms. The child did not cry, only watched with solemn gray eyes. In the days that followed, Winterfell thrummed like beehive in thaw. Council tents ringed the great hall. Scribes darted with scrolls, while cooks ladled stew for every empty belly. Dragons branched into separate roosts. Drogon claiming Broken Tower, Regal perching near glass gardens, Viserion curling atop new granary roof. Scalar sneaked through kitchens, stealing sausages, while Azira and the others hissed at cats who dared the yard. Direwolves formed their own patrols, trotting rampart by instinct older than architecture. Tywin oversaw rebuilding of grain silos, designing vent flues to double as signal horns if siege returned. Jaime sparred with Northmen, teaching southern footwork. Brienne instructed Dothraki in shield discipline. Pride wounded but curiosity piqued. Tormund brewed pine needle ale so strong unsullied relaxed enough to laugh. Singers from the Riverlands taught Dornish fiddlers the Ballad of Dawn, adding verses nightly as jokes blossomed. One evening, Tyrion hosted a supper in the feast hall's repaired western wing. He raised his goblet. To improbable meetings he toasted, and to the next improbable solution we will surely need. Laughter rippled. Even Stannis' mouth curved. Yet beneath mirth stalked caution. Scouts returned from Riverlands whispering of bandit companies who refused the new order. Others worried about the Citadel's archmaesters, some of whom decried sorcery and statecraft. Daenerys set up an embassy in Old Town, dispatching dragonglass scholars. Robb offered pardons to rebel farmers. They learned governance was war by gentler means, a siege of patience, alliances, and humility. One crisp morning, Sansa escorted Illyar to the battlements to feel first snowflakes of the year's late storm. The child grasped at them, squealing, warmth radiating until each flake melted before landing. The guards watched, Awed, Sansa whispered, "Your gift is balance, little one." Below, Tywin measured foundation lines for a new library tower. Across yard, Arya taught orphan girls footwork with broom handles. Near the stables, Jon fitted wildling teens with padded jerkins, Ghost weaving between legs. Brienne polished armor for an honor guard. Tyrion scribbled a wry preface for the council's first charter. Everything in motion, everything wending toward dawn. That evening a raven arrived, its scroll carrying the seal of High Septon Euros. An invitation for Robb and Daenerys to consecrate the great sept of Beller's replacement, the Starfall Forum, under shared banners. A small step, but monumental. Tyrion declared it proof the realm had begun healing. Stannis nodded, conceding his faith could share altars. Daenerys touched Robb's hand. "We ride in spring," she said. Spring. The word tasted like honey and risk. Crocuses pierced thawing soil in the gods' wood. Dragons shed winter scales, revealing iridescence beneath. Sheep bleated beyond broken walls. Children practiced reading by lantern light under the carved beams of Brandon's gift hall. On the first vernal equinox, the Great Council convened in Winterfell's refurbished Great Hall. Each house, north and south, Essos born, Free Folk clan, sent a delegate. They sat in concentric rings around a low stone hearth, now holding simple living flame. Robb and Daenerys did not preside but occupied equal chairs among equals. Elia wrapped in wolf fur on Daenerys' lap, eyes round. Tyrion opened with a jest. Stannis countered with stern blessing. Arya winked at the Dornish envoy. Bran's ravens circled overhead. The first motion: abolish hereditary primogeniture for realm stewardship. Voices rose, some furious, some amazed. An aged lord named Oakheart stood trembling. He spoke of tradition's chain. Sansa spoke next, reciting tales of chains used to drown innocence. Tywin followed her, surprising many by arguing for merit, shaped by sacrifice. The vote tallied, slim majority in favor. Cheers erupted, mingling with curses. Jon breathed relief. Robb grasped Daenerys' hand. Eliar gurgled. Second motion: enshrine the faith of Seven and the old gods equally, alongside freedom for Arlor and the many-faced. The hall held breath. Davos raised his stump and said, "When night came, no god cared which god you prayed to, only whether you guarded your neighbor." The vote passed. Wider this time. Night deepened. Motions blurred into council after council. Land redistribution along the gift. A standing dawn watch army rotating leadership. Reparations for small folk villages burned in the war. Some failed, others won. Voices clashed, then cooled. Each compromise felt like forging steel. Heated, hammered, quenched in bracing water. By dawn, the charter parchment stretched yards long. Signatures blotched from numb fingers. Tyrion collapsed across it, ink-stained and snoring. Laughter rippled, soft but victorious. Sunlight pierced stained glass, splashing red and gold across stone. Eliare reached into the ray. The light bent around her fingers, shimmering pearl. No one spoke until a raven cawed. Then Bran's gentle voice: "The tree roots feed today." Outside, Winterfell's courtyards erupted in celebration. Banners unfurled, drums pounded, pipes skirled. Free folk roasted boar beside Reachmen, kneading bread. Dornish wine flowed with North ale. Dragons wheeled overhead, wolves bounded below. Children painted each other's faces half gray, half crimson, giggling as colors blended into dawn pink. Robb and Daenerys slipped away to the crypts. The torches flickered as they descended past the effigies. Eddard with ice sword, Lyanna with winter roses, unknown ancient kings huddling in shadow. They knelt before Eddard's statue. Robb laid the charter at his father's stony feet. Daenerys placed a dragon-scale living ember beside it. They bowed. When they rose, they faced one another. Not king and queen, but two hearts tempered by endless night. Robb brushed her cheek. "We did not vanquish darkness," he said. "We just gave dawn a spark." Daenerys answered with a smile raw and true. "Then keep feeding it with story. Together, they climbed to courtyard. Snow had ceased. Sun-warmed stone. Eliara waited on Sansa's hip, wide-eyed at every marvel. As her parents approached, she reached out, laughing. Robb lifted her high. Daenerys spread arms like wings. In that moment, banners snapped. Dragons bellowed. Direwolves howled, and a chorus of every tongue rose into sky. The song traveled far, across narrow sea, over red deserts, through ruined sepulchres, into hearts of children yet unborn. Years hence, balladeers would shorten, embroider, and sometimes maim the tale. They would sing of the nights king shattered, of dragons reborn, of a babe who inherited frost and flame in equal measure. But in the hush between their verses, listeners might feel the echo of the true moment. The instant dawn caught on a newborn's fingertips, and the world understood it need not choose between burning or freezing. It could do something rarer. It could breathe. And as long as breath endured, the wolf and the dragon would watch the horizon together. Guardians not of thrones, but of the fragile, reckless, glorious possibility called dawn.